Chapter 81. The time it takes for a stick of incense to burn was extremely precious to the Dual Heroes Hall. For some people, time passed very quickly. For example, Qinglian, she was only absent-minded for a while, fantasizing about how much benefit she could get this time, and time passed quickly. But for Wu Qing and Wu Xian, every minute and every second was extremely torturous. From time to time, they would look into the distance, hoping that someone would come over. But no. The time it takes for a stick of incense to burn was up. Delta Orgi opened her eyes, and a shocking killing intent flashed in her bright eyes. She said coldly, "Stubborn, get ready to attack. Qinglian, you lead the charge." When Qinglian heard this, the complacent expression on her face immediately disappeared, and she turned to look at Delta Orgi. When she saw Delta Orgi's eyes filled with killing intent and coldness, she turned her head again. Qinglian's expression was uncertain. Finally, she gritted her teeth and shouted, "Kill." Then, she led the people from the Azure Lotus gang to take the lead and kill. She understood that the reason Delta Orgi brought her along this time was to reduce the damage to Blood Moon. Using the lives of her people to reduce the damage to Blood Moon. But since she had chosen this path, she could only walk it to the end. Wu Qing and Wu Xian, on the other hand, rushed over with calm faces. After the two groups of people collided, the people from Blood Moon rushed up. As for Delta Orgi, she walked slowly at the back, her footsteps light, as if she was taking a stroll. Wu Qing and Qinglian exchanged blows, and the other pure spirit realm cultivators also found opponents of the same level. However, Blood Moon had two more pure spirit realm cultivators than the Dual Heroes Hall, and those two people crazily killed their way into the crowd of spirit gathering realm cultivators. In the blink of an eye, several people from the Dual Heroes Hall died. After the puppet battle, there were only about 50 people left in the Dual Heroes Hall. Originally, they planned to accumulate cultivation resources in the fog area and walk the path of elites. Unfortunately, before they could get their cultivation resources, they were met with the joint attack of Blood Moon and the Azure Lotus gang. Wu Qing's heart bled as he watched his men being killed one by one. However, what made him despair was the Delta Orgi. At this moment, Delta Orgi, dressed in a pure white dress, slowly walked over like a fairy under the moonlight. But in Wu Qing's eyes, this was clearly an impermanence from the netherworld, coming to steal his soul. This kind of psychological pressure was even greater than the pressure Qinglian gave him during the fight. Not long after Blood Moon's people arrived, the Twin Heroes Hall began to crumble. Wu Qing and Wu Xian seemed to have foreseen their defeat. Just as they were feeling hopeless, a clear voice came from afar. "Stop. Listen to me." This voice, it's Yushu. Wu Qing and Wu Xian recognized Yushu's voice. Boundless hope rose in their hearts, and their swords became even sharper. After the ruthless sword forced Qinglian to retreat, he also withdrew. When Delta Orgi saw Yushu arrive, she knew that the plan had reached the next step. She immediately said, "Stop." Delta Orgi gave the order, and all the Blood Moon and Qinglian gang members hurriedly retreated. Wu Qing and Wu Qing finally breathed a sigh of relief. When they turned around, they saw Yushu rushing over with 4 pure spirit realm cultivators and dozens of spirit assembly realm cultivators. Yushu was the first to arrive. He stood beside Wu Qing and nodded. Then, he smiled at Delta Orgi and said, "Blood Moon's Moon Lord, how have you been? If you have something to say, say it." Delta Orgi did not give him a good look. Yushu's smile immediately disappeared, but he still said calmly, "Moon Lord, you may not know, but the Twin Heroes Hall has become a subordinate force of the Yushu clan not long ago. You attacking the Twin Heroes Hall is equivalent to attacking the Yushu clan. Seeing that Moon Lord does not know, I will let today's matter go. You and I are still allies." "Nonsense." Qinglian heard and immediately shouted, "When did the Twin Heroes Hall submit to the Yushu clan? Why didn't we know? Besides, if it's true, why didn't the Twin Heroes Hall mention the Yushu clan in the beginning to make us afraid?" Qinglian felt that this was the time for her to play her role, so she stepped forward and said these words. However, she did not expect that the answer she got was Yushu's blade. To be more precise, before Qinglian's voice fell, Yushu had already rushed over at a high speed. When Qinglian realized it, Yushu's blade had already slashed out. A sharp blade slashed out. Qinglian stabbed several times, but she was unable to block the blade. At this moment, her face finally turned pale with fright. She only had time to place her spirit sword in front of her. In the next moment, there was a "ka" sound, and the spirit sword broke. But at the same time, the blade was finally exhausted. And Yushu held the hilt of the blade and placed it on Qinglian's neck. Qinglian was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale. Layers of cold sweat flowed from her forehead and dripped to the ground. Yushu's face was full of killing intent, and he said coldly, "I am talking to the Moon Lord. Who are you to interrupt?" Moon Lord. Qinglian looked at Delta Origi pitifully, but she did not dare to speak loudly for fear of touching the blade. Delta Origi looked at Yushu at this moment and said lightly, "I haven't seen you for a few days, and you have improved a lot." Hee hee. Yushu's face suddenly changed, and he smiled proudly. In these few days, because he practiced the rank 3 cultivation technique Moonlight Cloud Codex, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had faintly touched the threshold of the 6th level of the pure spirit realm. He was indeed much stronger than a few days ago. But compared to Delta Origi, he still paled in comparison. So he smiled and said, "Compared to the Moon Lord, my cultivation is not worth mentioning. I can tell the difference very clearly. It's just that the Moon Lord's subordinates can't tell the difference." Yushu said as he waved the hilt of the blade twice, scaring Qinglian into a panic. "Let go of Qinglian." "Sure, but do you have a reason for that?" "What reason do you want?" "Take her away, and we will still be allies." "What if I say no? Will you make an enemy of Blood Moon for a Twin Heroes Hall?" Delta Origi glanced at Wu Qing and Wu Xian, a little amused. Hearing this, Wu Qing and Wu Xian's hearts sank. Yes, would Yushu make an enemy of Blood Moon for them? If it were them, they would probably choose to ally with Blood Moon. Then what choice would Yushu make? Their lives were now in Yushu's hands. Ha ha ha. Yushu suddenly laughed out loud, and said, "Delta Origi, you underestimate me too much. Today, I will protect the Twin Heroes Hall. This is the promise I made to them." You don't understand the feelings between men. Wu Qing and Wu Xian were touched when they heard this. They really didn't expect Yushu to make such a choice. If they could survive today, they would no longer have any objections if they submitted to the Yushu clan. Delta Origi's eyes couldn't help but twitch a few times. She was almost disgusted to death by Yushu, but her face revealed a murderous intent, and she said coldly, "Is that so?" Before Delta Origi finished speaking, her figure suddenly disappeared in front of Yushu's eyes. In the next moment, Delta Origi's figure shot out, leaving behind afterimages. In the blink of an eye, she passed by Yushu and strangely appeared behind Wu Qing. Her soft sword had already pierced Wu Qing's heart. She said indifferently, "You can't protect the people I want to kill." Chapter 82. Wu Qing looked at the silver sword piercing his heart in horror, his face full of disbelief. Just a moment ago, he was still fantasizing about being able to live, and now he was at the end of his life. Most importantly, Delta Origi's attack was too sudden, too fast, and too strange. He didn't expect Delta Origi to attack at all, but he still had a trump card he hadn't used yet. He was unwilling to die just like that. But no matter how unwilling he was, he couldn't change his fate. A chill quickly engulfed his entire body, including his consciousness. After a few breaths, Wu Qing was completely silent. In these few breaths, everyone was stunned. Some were shocked, some were surprised, some were terrified, and some felt that it was inconceivable. But that was how things were. Delta Origi circled around Yushu in the blink of an eye and killed Wu Qing. Even Yushu himself was stunned. This time, he wasn't faking it, he was truly stunned. The first to react were Wu Xian and Qinglian. Qinglian took advantage of Yushu's stunned state to hurriedly retreat, escaping from Yushu's blade. Wu Xian also retreated with a pale face. At this time, Yushu finally regained his senses. Delta Origi's move had really frightened him. Thus, Yushu's face sank, and he said word by word, "Delta Origi. Do we really have to go this far? The moment you appeared here, you were destined to go this far." Delta Origi shook her head slightly. Yushu raised his head, and said angrily, "Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Attack." The Yushu clan's people immediately attacked. Delta Origi's flexible sword shook, and faced Yushu head-on, ignoring Wu Xian. Delta Origi's attack was like an order. Blood Moon and the Green Lotus Gang's people also attacked. The various factions were instantly thrown into chaos. However, if one took a closer look, they would realize that almost all the members of the Yushu clan were surrounding and killing the members of the Green Lotus Gang. On the other hand, Blood Moon's members attacked the members of Twin Heroes Hall. People were dying every moment on the battlefield, but no one noticed that 80% of the dead were from the Green Lotus Gang and the Twin Heroes Hall. Delta Origi and Yushu opened up a separate battlefield, and no one else was involved in their battle. After a while, Delta Origi winked at Yushu. Then, Yushu was sent flying with an ouch. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth, but a smile appeared on his face as he shouted, "Delta Origi, you are indeed very strong. I can't beat you. What a pity, your brain isn't very good. We've been fighting for so long, don't tell me you haven't noticed anything wrong?" Delta Origi thought for a moment, then her expression suddenly changed, and she said in a cold voice, "Dark Crow. Dark Crow isn't here, where is he?" "Ha ha ha, you only remembered now? You're really stupid. I'm afraid that Blood Moon's base will be destroyed by now." "What? You dare?" Delta Origi was furious, but she immediately controlled her emotions and shouted at Qinglian, "Qinglian, take the members of the Green Lotus Gang and retreat first. Even if Yushu is telling the truth, Blood Moon's camp still has a trump card. Dark Crow won't be able to succeed so quickly. Go back and help, I'll hold them back." Qinglian's face immediately showed some gratitude. At this point in the battle, she had already discovered that more than half of her subordinates had died. Delta Origi telling her to go back first was equivalent to letting her preserve her strength and put herself in danger. Qinglian immediately agreed, "Don't worry, Moon Master, I'll go back and help the camp. I won't let Dark Crow succeed." Qinglian then led her subordinates out of the battlefield and ran towards the stone forest. Delta Origi no longer fought with Yushu, and turned to kill Wu Xian. Qinglian brought her people to the boundary between the misty area and the stone forest. Suddenly, she stopped. She saw that not far away, there were 30 to 40 figures standing in the mist. She could feel a faint killing intent before they even got close, and it was obvious that they didn't come with good intentions. Her heart couldn't help but sink. This time, she came out with about 40 people with Delta Origi, and it could be said that she brought 70% of the Green Lotus Gang's fighting strength. However, after a round of battle, there were only a dozen or so people left. She was already heartbroken, and the current scene made her feel even more hopeless. Qinglian took a deep breath and said, "I wonder where," but before she could finish, she shut her mouth. At this time, a mysterious person covered in a black cloak and wearing a dark golden mask walked over. That person held a saber in his right hand, and the saber blade flickered with spiritual light, as if it was a black impermanence that came out of the underworld to take lives. Dark Crow. Qinglian stuttered, and her heart was filled with fear. During the Battle of Puppets, she saw with her own eyes that Dark Crow cut off the 4 sharp claws of the mutated demonic beast with one slash, and then held back the demonic beast with his own strength. She also saw Dark Crow kill Shui Wuhai, who was at the 6th level of the pure spirit realm, and Zhang Jiga, who went all out. Dark Crow's strength was recognized as strong. And after a battle, Qinglian didn't have enough spiritual power in her body, so she had no chance of winning. Of course, even if she was at her peak, she still wouldn't have a chance of winning. But Qinglian still had a glimmer of hope, and that was that Dark Crow didn't come to kill her. She quickly said, Dark Crow, listen to me. It's Blood Moon and Delta Origi that want to become enemies with your Yushu clan. I'm just a dog by her side, and I have no choice but to do so. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. You should go find Delta Origi. Ling Shichi felt that her words were a bit ridiculous, but he didn't say anything. He waved his left hand, and the 30 to 40 people behind him quickly surrounded the people of Qinglian gang. No, don't kill me. I can rely on the Yushu clan. I know Blood Moon's camp, and I know Delta Origi's arrangements. I can help you destroy Blood Moon's camp. Qinglian said in a panic, hoping to show her value in exchange for her life. But the answer she got was another saber ray. She was very familiar with this saber ray, because not long ago, she had personally experienced its power. This saber ray was also very unfamiliar to her, because it was much stronger than the one Yushu had released. After a few breaths, Qinglian's stiff body fell to the ground, and her face was still filled with reluctance to leave this world. As for the other members of the Qinglian gang, they naturally went to accompany her. Ling Shichi put away his saber and muttered, the outcome has been decided. On the other side, Wu Xian had already died under the sword of Delta Origi on the battlefield of Twin Heroes Hall. The two leaders of Twin Heroes Hall had died, and the members of Twin Heroes Hall were all ashen-faced. Brother Wu Xian. Yushu shouted in grief and indignation, Delta Origi. You and I can't exist under the same sky. What can you do to me? Delta Origi coldly replied. I can't do anything to you now, but you have to think clearly. So what if you take down the Haze district? Blood Moon has occupied 2 districts at the same time, so how many people can you send to guard the Haze district? You have to remember that I will always be watching you. As long as you're not here, I will lead people to attack the Haze district and make you lose more than you gain. Yushu said with a crazy expression. Delta Origi's face couldn't help but sink when she heard this. She hesitated for a moment, then finally waved her hand and shouted, Retreat. Immediately, the people of Blood Moon withdrew from the battlefield in an orderly manner, and the people of Yushu clan didn't stop them. At this time, there were only 20 to 30 people left in Twin Heroes Hall, and there wasn't a single spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm. It could be said that they were no longer a force to be reckoned with. Although they were lucky to have survived, they were also a little confused. Where should they go from here? With Twin Heroes Hall's current strength, any faction could easily destroy them, so they had to seek protection. At this moment, someone suddenly appeared and said, the Jade Gang's ideology is as high as the sky. In order to protect us, they didn't hesitate to fight to the death with Blood Moon. I suggest that everyone join the Yushu clan and fight against Blood Moon together. Yes, I agree. I am also willing to join. Join the Yushu clan and fight against Blood Moon together. Yushu secretly smiled when he saw this. Chapter 83. When Ling Shichi brought people back to the Yushu clan, Yushu hurriedly pulled him over and said excitedly, Brother Ling, wonderful, truly wonderful. We destroyed the Twin Heroes Hall without any effort, Yushu admires us. Now that we have occupied 2 areas, we just have to wait for the next eruption of cultivation resources to pick them up. This is great. Ling Shichi glanced at him and said, It's only 2 areas, and you're so happy? Yushu opened his mouth wide when he heard this, and immediately hugged Ling Shichi's arm, his big face smiling like a chrysanthemum. Brother, you're my big brother. What do you mean by this? Is it what I think it is? Why do I have the urge to kneel down? Ling Shichi was a little speechless as he pulled his arm away and said sternly, These few days, settle down the people from the Twin Heroes Hall who have come to seek refuge with us, and try to separate them as much as possible. Also, don't be stingy with distributing the commonly used cultivation resources, and quickly increase the overall strength of the clan. In any case, it can be replenished the next time the cultivation resources erupt. Also, send more people to inquire about the Sand and Wind Valley, and keep an eye on their movements. If there are any special matters, inform me immediately. Understood. After giving out all the instructions, Ling Shiqi returned to the cave. There were still 3 to 4 days before the next eruption of cultivation resources, and after that, they still had to leave some time to digest the cultivation resources, so there shouldn't be any big problems in the next 10 days. Ling Shiqi then immersed himself in cultivation. He still cultivated spirit energy and comprehended spiritual techniques every day, and during this time, he also slowly refined the 3 pure spirit pills. Since he had 2 kinds of third-rank cultivation methods, his cultivation soon reached the peak of the 6th level of the pure spirit realm. However, if he wanted to continue to break through to the 7th level of the pure spirit realm, there was a huge bottleneck, and it couldn't be broken through in a short time. Therefore, his cultivation fell into a bottleneck. His progress in comprehending spiritual techniques was also quite slow, and although he had some ideas about merging the channel opening sword chi into the chaotic blossom dazzling eyes, he was still missing the final step. His spiritual techniques also didn't improve, which gradually made Ling Shiqi feel a little irritated. Bitter cultivation is useless now, I can only have a breakthrough in battle. But now that the Yushu clan is still accumulating strength, it's not suitable to make a move immediately. If I can't, I can only find monsters to fight, wait. At this time, Ling Shiqi patted his head, and took out the blue instance dungeon card. Since it's an instance card, there will definitely have a battle, let's give it a try. After that, Ling Shiqi activated the instance dungeon card. Instance card, primary, randomly generating instance dungeon, instance generating instance, beginner dungeon, spiritual ruins, initial exploration, single player, completion, defeat the Yushu King time limit, 1 natural day. Immediately, the card instantly bloomed with a large blue light, and finally formed a huge light blue door. Ling Shiqi circled the light blue door twice and muttered to himself, the Yushu instance dungeon seems to be an instance in a game I played a long time ago. I seem to have some impression, but I can't remember the specific details. In short, it's an instance where you kill monsters to level up. But I don't know if it's the real body or the consciousness that enters the instance. If the real body enters, wouldn't it be equivalent to opening up a small world? Forget it, let's not think about it anymore. With the wonders of the system, it wouldn't be surprising if it opened up a small world. Let's prepare first. Then, Ling Shiqi first took out the food and water stored in the system backpack. He didn't notice it before, but when he took it out, it piled up to half the height of a person. Even Ling Shiqi couldn't help but be surprised. He casually picked up a bag and a water bag and tied it to his waist. The time limit for completing the instance dungeon was only 1 day, so he definitely didn't need to bring so many things in. He could completely free up 2 slots in the system backpack. And since he was entering the instance dungeon, there wouldn't be anyone else, so Ling Shiqi could naturally use his full strength. The 2 aspects he was best at now were his sword skills and his sword skills, so he carried the level 3 spirit sword and the spirit saber on his back. He first put the tendon-changing bow and the bow in the system backpack. When Ling Shiqi fought with the Yushu clan, he used the tendon-changing bow and the ghost archery, and the effect was amazing. Later, he specifically asked Yushu to send people to collect the bow and arrows, but unfortunately, only 6 were collected. The other 3 were chopped off by Yushu's saber, while the last one was lost. The remaining 5 slots were respectively filled with a level 2 long spear, a level 2 heavy axe, a blood explosion pill, and 2 other good things that he collected, all of which could be used as trump cards. Finally, he stuffed his body full of spiritual energy recovery and healing pills. After making all the preparations, Ling Shiqi resolutely walked into the light blue door of light. Immediately, Ling Shiqi felt his whole body become lightheaded. His vision turned black and then bright, and the surrounding environment had changed greatly. Ling Shiqi looked around for a moment. The light here was relatively dim, but he had already adapted to it after staying in the cave for a long time. He found himself standing on a high platform, and not far from his feet, there was a small bridge made of vines that connected to the platform on the other side. Looking up, there were a few strange shadows jumping around. At this moment, a deep voice abruptly resounded in the air. Legend has it that the spiritual ruins was originally a boundless forest, and there was a palace of the Beast King in it. However, One night 1,000 years ago, accompanied by a burst of shocking thunder, the forest suddenly withered, and the palace disappeared. Some people found some rare treasures in the ruins, and they said that the palace was underground. So people began to search this land, but there were countless casualties and no results. Gradually, this place became a terrifying forbidden area, and no one dared to approach. The voice disappeared here. Ling Shiqi touched his chin, feeling a little embarrassed. This is the dungeon introduction? There's no need for this. However, it was also because of this that he realized that his real body had indeed entered the dungeon world. I remember that at the beginning of the dungeon, there was a group of small monsters that were purely giving experience. I just don't know what will happen to me here. Ling Shiqi recalled the memories of his previous life and muttered. Zeng. Then, Ling Shiqi pulled out his spiritual sword and slowly walked across the small bridge of vines. The moment he stepped onto the platform, there was a zzz sound in front of him. Then, a group of small, black and white monsters that looked like foxes and monkeys jumped over. Lemurs. Ling Shiqi recalled the name of these monsters. These lemurs gathered together, and there were about 20 of them. They all stared at Ling Shiqi with green eyes. Ling Shiqi sensed that these lemurs were just demonic beasts that were not ranked. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 84. Of course, this was only the first wave of monsters, so he still could not let his guard down. Ling Shiqi immediately brandished his spirit sword and charged straight into the group of lemurs. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Ling Shiqi stepped on the black fog and charged into the group of lemurs like a ghost. Sword light flashed, and the lemurs could not even block a single strike. In the blink of an eye, several lemurs died under the sword. However, the other lemurs did not fear death and continued to charge forward. The speed of the lemurs was not slow to begin with. More than 10 lemurs pounced on Ling Shiqi at the same time. Even though Ling Shiqi had 2 perfection stage movement techniques, his body was still cut a few times. However, Ling Shiqi did not care at all. He stabbed out with the whisking willow sword style, and each strike took the life of a lemur. As the number of lemurs decreased, the pressure on Ling Shiqi lessened. It didn't take long for all the lemurs to be killed. Ling Shiqi did not look happy at all. Instead, he looked even more serious. He had deliberately charged into the group of lemurs to test how difficult this first wave was. Now, he looked at the scratches on his body and frowned. If the weakest wave of monsters could injure him, how strong would the monsters behind be? Ling Shiqi felt his heartbeat quicken. Looking ahead, there was excitement in the depths of his eyes. The blood in his body was even boiling. He liked the feeling of challenging the unknown. Ling Shiqi carried his spirit sword and continued forward. There was a stone bridge in front of him, and there was another kind of monster on the bridge, a lynx. The lynx looked like a cheetah, but its 2 black front claws were unusually wide. When it walked on the stone bridge, it left claw marks on the ground. In addition, a pair of fleshy wings that were 2 feet long extended from their shoulders. Although they couldn't fly, they were still able to move very quickly. Ling Shiqi counted carefully. There were 10 lynx wandering on the stone bridge. Judging from the strength of their breaths, they were very close to the first-ranked demonic beasts. Against these 10 lynx, Ling Shiqi knew that he could not fight them head-on. He picked up a few pebbles nearby, and with a flick of his finger, the pebbles hit a lynx on the edge of the stone bridge. The lynx immediately turned around and locked onto Ling Shiqi with a pair of reddish-yellow eyes. Immediately, the lynx arched its body and quickly pounced. The lynx was indeed faster than the lemur, but in Ling Shiqi's eyes, it was still a little slow. He moved his feet and dodged the attack. Then, he slashed down with his sword, and blood splattered everywhere. However, the lynx did not die. He turned around and clawed at it. Ling Shiqi didn't dodge this time, and his spirit sword pierced the lynx's claws. Poochie. The spirit sword pierced through the claws without losing any of its momentum and even pierced into the lynx's neck. The lynx let out a low howl and fell to the ground. The lynx's skin is indeed thicker than the lemur's, Ling Shiqi muttered to himself, then threw a pebble to attract another lynx. This time, Ling Shiqi directly stabbed out with his sword. Spiritual light flashed on the blade like lightning, killing the lynx in one move. Ling Shiqi then did the same thing, but this time, he attracted 3 lynx. Ling Shiqi did not panic. He used his confusion footwork, and every time he moved, he would stab out with his thunder sword, accurately and ruthlessly killing them. Looking at the last 5 lynx, Ling Shiqi didn't use pebbles to attract them. Instead, he directly rushed forward. The moment Ling Shiqi stepped on the stone bridge, his eyes narrowed. The moment the 5 lynx pounced at him, he entered a strange state. He turned into a few afterimages and passed through the 5 lynx. Almost at the same time, 5 sword rays flashed, mixed with an invisible sword chi. In the blink of an eye, the 5 lynx's necks were suddenly cut open. Their bodies staggered for a few more steps before finally falling to the ground. Ling Shiqi put away his sword and recalled the chaotic blossom dazzling eyes he just used. Even though he tried to integrate the unblocking meridian sword chi into it, unfortunately, only one sword chi was integrated. One had to know that the unblocking meridian sword chi was a level 3 spiritual technique. It was almost impossible to use it multiple times in an instant like blowing the willow. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi had already grasped the knack of it, so there was still hope. After killing these 10 lynx, Ling Shiqi knew that there was no danger for the time being. This was also an important reason why he dared to use the chaotic blossom dazzling eyes. After that, Ling Shiqi did not rush forward. Instead, he took out a spirit stone and recovered his spirit power first. In these 2 battles, he had been using the ghost parade and confusion footwork almost the entire time. In addition to other spiritual techniques, he had consumed nearly 30% of his spirit power in a short period of time. Since the time limit of this dungeon was an entire day, he could use his spirit power to quickly end the battle and then continue after recovering his spirit power. In less than a quarter of an hour, Ling Shiqi stood up. Then he walked across the stone bridge and came to a huge pillar. There was a circular platform on the side of the pillar. Ling Shiqi walked on the platform and came to the other side of the pillar. Behind the pillar, there was a green mark. Ling Shiqi reached out and touched the mark. Immediately, there was a rumbling sound. Ling Shiqi's expression did not change. He knew that he had triggered the mechanism to go up and down. Sure enough, the circular platform under Ling Shiqi's feet began to slowly descend. The further down he went, the darker the light became. It didn't take long for Ling Shiqi to reach the lowest point of the pillar. He raised his head and saw a huge dark bronze stone door that was 20 feet tall blocking his way. In the corner of the door, there was a weathered skeleton. Ling Shiqi didn't even look at the skeleton and walked straight to the stone door. He pressed his arms against the stone door and circulated his spiritual energy. The stone door was slowly pushed open and made a heavy sound. Behind the stone door was a deep corridor. There were several torches on the walls that had been burning for who knows how long, illuminating the surroundings. Ling Shiqi could see some strange patterns on the walls with the help of the light. When he walked to one of the patterns, he suddenly stopped. If I remember correctly, it should be here. As soon as he finished speaking, the wall on his right flashed with an extremely strange light. Then, a tall pig-headed monster jumped out of the mural. After the pig-headed monster jumped out, it roared a few times. When it saw Ling Shiqi, its 2 big eyes suddenly lit up with 2 green lights and disgusting saliva flowed out of its mouth. Pig badger. Ling Shiqi recognized this monster and felt the aura on its body. A tier 1 monster beast. It was even stronger than a rank 1 monster. Ling Shiqi's expression became serious. He did not dare to be careless. He slowly pulled out the spirit sword on his back and his whole body was filled with battle intent. The real challenge had only just begun. Chapter 85. Unsheathing his spirit saber, Ling Shiqi was full of fighting spirit and took the initiative to attack. Ling Shiqi used Ghost Parade and Confusion Footwork at the same time. His speed was as fast as the wind as he circled behind the pig badger and slashed out with his saber. However, when the saber landed on the pig badger's body, it made a ding-ding-dang-dang sound. Only then did Leng Shiqi notice that the animal's skin on the pig badger's body had almost formed a heavy armor. When the saber slashed down, it only shattered this layer of armor, causing a little green liquid to seep out of the pig badger's back. For the pig badger, this was not painful at all. Swoosh! The pig badger suddenly attacked, its sharp claws tearing through the air. Leng Shiqi quickly dodged and found that the pig badger's speed was about the same as a lynx's, so he immediately changed his strategy. Next, Leng Shiqi no longer faced the pig badger head-on. Instead, he relied on his movement technique to constantly circle around it, slashing whenever he had the opportunity. At the same time, he was also looking for the pig badger's weakness. Puchi, Leng Shiqi's saber slashed the pig badger's neck. He felt as if the saber had cut through a piece of soft meat, and he knew that the pig badger's weakness was at the back of its neck. He was slightly happy, but at this moment, he suddenly saw the mural on the other side begin to squirm and flash with a strange light. Not good. Leng Shiqi's expression changed slightly. While dodging the pig badger's attack, he raised his hand and an earth wall rose from the ground to block the mural. Roar! Soon after, Leng Shiqi opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar. A formless sound wave shook the pig badger and stunned it. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Leng Shiqi jumped high and a bright light shone on his spirit saber. Then, he suddenly swung his saber and slashed out a dazzling saber aura. The saber aura slashed into the pig badger's neck and a large amount of green liquid burst out. However, when the saber aura was halfway in, it was embedded inside. More importantly, the pig badger was not dead yet. The earth wall on the other side began to crack. The pig badger let out a series of mournful screams, its arms flailing wildly. Leng Shiqi wanted to pull out the spirit saber, but when he tried, he found that he couldn't pull it out. At first, he was anxious, but then an idea flashed through his mind. With a thought, a heavy axe suddenly appeared in his other hand, while the spirit saber disappeared. He was using the system space to retrieve the spirit saber and summon the heavy axe. Leng Shiqi took the opportunity to grab the heavy axe with both hands, aimed at the huge wound, and swung it down fiercely. With a plop, the huge pig's head was chopped off and fell to the ground. Stinky green liquid spurted out like a column. However, Leng Shiqi wasn't in the mood to pay attention to this, because the earth wall next to him had already shattered, and a deer monster rushed out of it, bulldozer deer. As soon as the bull deer appeared, it locked onto Leng Shiqi and charged at him with its two large antlers. Facing the bull deer, Leng Shiqi wasn't in a hurry. He directly threw the heavy axe on the ground, making a clanging sound. He drew his sword with his right hand and pointed the tip of the sword, shooting out an invisible sword chi. The bull deer was similar to the pig badger. Its fur and hide formed a set of armor. However, the bull deer exposed many weaknesses. Its forelimbs weren't protected by armor. The meridian unblocking sword chi directly pierced through the bull deer's thigh, leaving a bloody hole. At the same time, the sword chi entered its body and immediately blocked its meridians, hindering the flow of spirit energy. Monster beasts were powerful because they were born with powerful bodies that humans couldn't compare to. Furthermore, they were able to contain a lot of spirit energy. Just like humans, monster beasts had meridians in their bodies, and spirit energy flowed through their meridians. The only difference was that humans learned how to use spirit energy more flexibly and cleverly after learning cultivation techniques, while monster beasts only knew how to use spirit energy based on their instincts. Leng Shiqi's meridian unblocking sword chi not only had a strong penetrative power, it also blocked the meridians after entering the body, hindering the flow of spirit energy. If a spirit cultivator was hit by the meridian unblocking sword chi, they might be able to think of a way to bypass the meridians. However, monster beasts didn't have that kind of intelligence. The bull deer charged forward recklessly. The injury to its thigh didn't affect it much, but the meridian unblocking sword chi blocked the flow of spirit energy in its body. The bull deer immediately lost control of its body and fell to the ground. Ling Shiqi seized the opportunity and sent out several meridian unblocking sword chi to seal the bulldeer's meridians. Without the support of spirit energy, monster beasts were only left with their bodies. Although they were still very strong, they weren't much of a threat to Ling Shiqi. Thus, Ling Shiqi tried his best to conserve his spirit energy and slowly killed the bulldeer. After killing the pig badger and the bulldeer, Ling Shiqi didn't let down his guard. He knew that the strongest monster in this corridor hadn't appeared yet. At the end of the corridor, there was a wall. On the wall, there was a carving of a monster that was neither human nor beast. The monster was sitting cross-legged with a blood-red bead in its hands. The moment the bulldeer died, the carving suddenly lit up with a terrifying blood-red light. Especially the blood-red bead that was constantly twisting. Following that, a monster suddenly jumped out. Sharp-clawed wolf. The sharp-clawed wolf looked a little like a beastman. Its entire body was covered in light armor, and its 2 feet long black claws extended from its claws. It looked abnormally terrifying. However, the aura on its body was even more terrifying. It could be said that it was the strongest rank 1 monster Ling Shiqi had ever seen. It was even stronger than the mutated monster from before. Ling Shiqi took a deep breath. He knew that this was a strong opponent. The moment the sharp-clawed wolf appeared, it raised its claws high. When its claws fell, the sharp-clawed wolf was already in front of Ling Shiqi. Shwa! The sharp-clawed wolf swung down, but it grabbed empty air. Ling Shiqi was already prepared when the sharp-clawed wolf made its move. He hurriedly teleported away. However, he was still shocked by the sharp-clawed wolf's speed. Its speed wasn't inferior to the mutated monster from before. The sharp-clawed wolf didn't hit its target, but it continued to attack. Its claws lit up with a faint blood-red light. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to take it head-on. He hurriedly used the confusion footwork to dodge. At the same time, a pulse unblocking sword chi shot out. The pulse unblocking sword chi only cut a small wound on the monster's body. The pulse unblocking sword chi entered the sharp-clawed wolf's body and blocked its spirit energy. Ling Shiqi's eyes narrowed. He pointed the tip of his sword at the sharp-clawed wolf and used the chaotic flower's dazzling eyes. The sharp-clawed wolf seemed to have some intelligence. It felt the threat and the blood-red light on its claws bloomed. Then its entire body spun rapidly. The blood-red light connected into a blood-red halo. Ling Shiqi's chaotic flower's dazzling eyes sword light pierced the blood-red halo. There was a soft sound of metal clashing and dazzling sparks. After the chaotic flower's dazzling eyes move, only 2 pulse unblocking sword chi broke through the sharp-clawed wolf's defense and pierced into its body. Ling Shiqi was shocked. His chaotic flower's dazzling eyes move was broken for the first time. And it was broken by a monster. Chapter 86. This was the first time that Ling Shiqi's chaotic flower dazzling eyes was broken. Although he was shocked, he didn't slow down. The claws of the wolf could only defend its upper body. Ling Shiqi immediately shot out a few Chongmai chakra sword chi and hit the wolf's legs. Puff puff puff, a few small wounds appeared on the wolf's legs. It stopped moving and its legs tightly grasped the ground. Its upper body was twisted to a terrifying angle. Its whole body was covered with a layer of blood. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He recalled that this was the starting motion of the wolf claw's unique skill. Sure enough, after a breath, the wolf's figure suddenly disappeared. It was so fast that it only left a red light in the dim corridor. Swish! Ling Shiqi tried his best to move out, but a large part of his clothes was still scratched by the wolf. It even left a few bloody marks on his left leg. However, Ling Shiqi didn't dare to stop and continue to move because the wolf disappeared again. This time, Ling Shiqi had a premonition. While moving, he waved his sword and made a ding sound. However, although he blocked the attack, his body was still smashed to the wall by the wolf's powerful force. At this time, the wolf jumped high and rushed towards Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi was not surprised. He turned around and ran along the wall. It was the chakra walk technique. Immediately, with a boom sound, the wolf blasted a big hole in the place where Leng Shiqi was just. It waved its claws again, and a scarlet blood light burst out from its claws. With a wave, the blood light turned into 3 astral swords and quickly cut towards Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi controlled his spiritual power to move back and forth on the wall, narrowly avoiding the 2 astral swords. However, he couldn't avoid the last one. Leng Shiqi hurriedly put away his sword and a sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. The battle saber overflowed with spiritual light as Leng Shiqi slashed down, and a crescent-shaped saber light poured out. Ding 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 ding, the saber radiance and the saber aura collided head-on, and a dense sound of collision immediately rang out. Gradually, the blood-red saber aura became fainter and fainter. Finally, its power was exhausted and it dissipated. But Leng Shiqi's blade was still there. The sharp claw wolf's legs had already been penetrated by the meridian-piercing sword qi, and the series of powerful attacks just now had consumed a lot of its physical strength and spiritual power. At this moment, it was already somewhat weak. Leng Shiqi's spirit saber flashed with saber aura. He jumped down from the wall and slashed at the wolf with the sharp saber aura. The sharp claw wolf was in a weakened state, and its speed was much slower. There was no way it could dodge. The saber light instantly engulfed the wolf and chopped off one of its claws. Ayo! The claw wolf howled. It was unknown whether it had recovered its strength or it was just a momentary lapse of consciousness. Its figure moved and ran away, just in time to avoid another strike from Leng Shiqi. Seeing this, Leng Shiqi made a prompt decision. The spirit saber in his hand directly chased after the sharp claw wolf. At the same time, Leng Shiqi unsheathed his spirit sword. A black fog rose under his feet, and the sword stabbed out. 1 saber and 1 sword, 1 left and 1 right, attacked the sharp claw wolf almost at the same time. The sharp claw wolf waved its other claw and slapped the spirit saber away. At this moment, Leng Shiqi came with his sword. Before the sword arrived, the sword aura arrived first. A ray of meridian-piercing sword qi tore open the light armor in front of the sharp claw wolf's heart. Just as Leng Shiqi was about to stab it, its speed suddenly increased. Rushing thunder sword. With a poochie sound, the spirit sword pierced the sharp claw wolf's heart. Immediately, several rays of sword aura surged out, wantonly strangling its flesh and internal organs. At the same time, it was strangling its vitality. Leng Shiqi did not dare to neglect the sharp claw wolf. His left hand formed a fist, and the surging fist force was like riding the wind and breaking the waves as it fiercely smashed into the sharp claw wolf's heart. Tiger breaking 3 waves fist. The 2 forces, one bright and one dark, arrived and completely destroyed the sharp claw wolf's vitality. Leng Shiqi pulled out his spirit sword, kicked the sharp claw wolf's corpse away, and then leaned against the wall, panting. A strong sense of exhaustion came from his body. The battle with the sharp claw wolf had consumed almost 80% of his spirit power. Not only that, but it had also forced him to use all of his trump cards. He had used Chaotic Flower's dazzling eyes, Waning Moon rapid light slash, and Tiger breaking 3 waves fist to barely kill this beast. It could be said that it had forced him to use all of his skills. It could be seen how terrifying this sharp claw wolf was. Leng Shiqi hurriedly swallowed spirit recovery pills and healing pills. Then, he picked up the spirit saber and heavy axe, and took out 2 spirit stones to meditate on the spot and began to recover his spirit power. After about an hour, Leng Shiqi stopped. At this moment, he had recovered all of his spirit power. Unexpectedly, he found that the spirit power in his body was a bit purer. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Sure enough, only by constantly fighting could he improve faster. Then, he walked to the end of the long corridor and went around the wall where the sharp claw wolf had jumped out. Behind it was a narrow, secret passage that led upwards. Leng Shiqi knew that this secret passage had a mechanism. As long as someone went in, the walls on both sides would be filled with dense spikes. He estimated that the secret passage was only a few hundred feet away. Immediately, he used the 100 Ghosts Nocturnal Walk enigmatic footwork and leaped into the secret passage. 2 seconds after Leng Shiqi entered the secret passage, the walls on both sides began to shake. However, at this time, Leng Shiqi was already halfway through. Kacha, the walls on both sides rose, revealing countless thick spikes inside. The spikes began to slowly pierce out. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was already 70% of the way through. Boom boom boom, the two walls with countless spikes collided. If someone was inside, they would definitely die without a complete corpse. Unfortunately, at the moment they closed in, a figure leaped out. Leng Shiqi looked at the sealed secret passage behind him and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. If he was a little slower, he would have stayed inside forever. Leng Shiqi collected his thoughts and looked around. At this time, he was standing on the edge of a cliff. On the opposite side of the cliff was the ruins of an old palace. There were broken walls everywhere. There was a long broken suspension bridge between the cliffs. Leng Shiqi carefully walked onto the suspension bridge. The suspension bridge immediately swayed. He quickly used his spirit power to stabilize himself. As he walked, Leng Shiqi couldn't help but look down. He saw that it was all fog and he didn't know how deep it was. A black fog immediately rose from Leng Shiqi's feet. He suddenly sped up and quickly crossed the suspension bridge. When he stepped on the ground of the ruins, he felt that he was on solid ground. However, he didn't continue to move forward. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. On the road to the palace, there was a dilapidated square. The square was full of collapsed stone pillars. On each of these broken pillars stood a statue. Upon closer inspection, they were all bat statues. However, these bats were half the height of a person. Leng Shiqi picked up a few stones by his feet. After experiencing this dungeon, he naturally knew that these were not statues, but monsters, claw bats. Chapter 87. So. A small stone hit a bat statue. Immediately after, the bat sculpture began to crack, making a ka-ka sound. In the blink of an eye, a huge bat monster broke through the statue and flew out. It first circled in the air, and when it found Leng Shiqi, it immediately opened its claws and flew over. Rank 1 monster. Leng Shiqi felt the presence of the sharp claw bat from afar and his heart changed. Normal rank 1 monsters were nothing to Leng Shiqi, but looking around, there were at least 10 to 20 sharp claw bats in the square. Behind them were the more troublesome sound wave bats and the bat leader. And these bats all had the ability to fly. Although they were not very high, they were still a big problem for Leng Shiqi. This was not easy to pass, so he could only take it step by step. A sharp claw bat flew over. Leng Shiqi's spirit sword shook and shot out 2 streaks of unblocking pulse sword chi. The unblocking pulse sword chi directly pierced through the bat's wings and sealed its spirit energy. The bat suddenly fell down halfway. Leng Shiqi immediately rushed forward. With a sword in his right hand and a saber in his left, he quickly killed the bat. Leng Shiqi sensed the spirit chi in his body. Killing this ordinary sharp claw bat consumed nearly 20% of his spirit chi. In other words, he would have to stop to recover his spirit energy after killing 5 bats at most. This was destined to be a long battle. He muttered, "It's a bit troublesome." But if this idea spread out, he would definitely be beaten to death by many people. It had to be known that even the people at the 5th or 6th level of the pure spirit realm on the Blood Mist Island would barely be able to fight a single bat. Leng Shiqi only used 20% of his spirit energy to easily kill it, and he still looked unhappy. Troublesome was troublesome, but it was better than being surrounded and killed by a large group of rank 1 monsters. Next, Leng Shiqi steadily attracted one bat after another. When he ran out of spirit energy, he would recover it. Gradually, there were fewer and fewer statues in the square, and the Leng Shiqi's position became deeper and deeper. When the last sharp claw bat died under his sword, Leng Shiqi used the same trick again. He threw a stone to attract the sonic bats behind him. These sonic bats were different from the claw bats. They were smaller in size and did not have particularly sharp teeth or claws. However, it could emit a strange sound wave. In the game world, it only caused damage, but Leng Shiqi wasn't sure what effect it would have now. But in any case, he had to be more careful. However, to his surprise, even though the stone had only hit one sonic bat, several of the statues around it had already begun to crack. Even the bat leader that was about 10 feet tall was included. Oh no! Leng Shiqi knew something was wrong. Just as he was about to retreat, the bat leader and several sonic bats opened their ferocious mouths at the same time. Waves of silent, invisible sound waves filled the entire square. These sound waves clearly did not have any sound, but when they fell into his ears, Leng Shiqi's eardrums were torn apart. His brain also felt like it was being stabbed by needles. And those bats had already pounced on Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi forcibly endured the pain in his head. He opened his mouth wide and a huge sound wave also resounded through the square, immediately canceling out a portion of the sound waves. Using sound waves to fight sound waves. And Leng Shiqi's sound waves also made the bats dizzy. Other than the bat leader that could still fly in the air, the other sonic bats all fell to the ground. Leng Shiqi did not retreat at this time. Instead, he moved forward. His body suddenly turned into several phantoms, and with a sharp sword aura and invisible sword chi, he passed through the sonic bats. For a moment, the sword aura flashed and the sword chi was everywhere. More than half of those sonic bats died in an instant. At this moment, Leng Shiqi did not expect that he would actually complete the fusion of channel unblocking sword chi and chaotic blossoms gradually mesmerizing eyes while his mind was not clear. The power of chaotic blossoms gradually mesmerizing eyes, which was integrated with a rank 3 spiritual skill, instantly increased by several levels. But there was also bad news. Chaotic blossoms gradually mesmerizing eyes was indeed very strong, but the spiritual power consumed also increased dramatically. This move had consumed more than 30% of his spiritual energy. When Leng Shiqi had just broken through to the pure spirit realm, this move also consumed about 30% of his spiritual power. But now Leng Shiqi's cultivation was at the peak of the 6th level of the pure spirit realm. Although it was the same 30%, the difference was very big. Consuming so much spiritual power in an instant made Leng Shiqi feel a faint sense of exhaustion. At this time, the bat leader rapidly flapped its wings, but it did not fly over. Instead, it gradually gathered a strong wind in front of it. Leng Shiqi knew that it was not good. Suddenly, the bat leader spread its wings, and a huge gust of strong wind attacked. "Rise!" Leng Shiqi shouted in a low voice, and a thick earth wall suddenly rose in front of him. He tapped the wall with the tip of his foot and flew back. Unexpectedly, the seemingly thick earth wall did not even last 2 breaths of time before it shattered. Fortunately, Leng Shiqi had already used the confusion steps to move out. Even so, the side of his body was still a little bit blown by the strong wind, and he suddenly felt as if countless small knives were cutting his body, opening up dozens of small wounds. Hiss, Leng Shiqi secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. If I was hit directly, wouldn't it be the same as being executed by 1,000 cuts? After blowing out the strong wind, the bat leader's speed suddenly slowed down. Leng Shiqi's eyes lit up, and he put away his sword and a longbow appeared in his hand. It was the rank 2 spiritual weapon, tendon-changing bow. Leng Shiqi turned around, took out 3 arrows, and put them on the bowstring. At this time, the bat leader had already opened its claws and rushed over. Bang! Leng Shiqi shouted again, and then an earth pillar as thick as an arm suddenly drilled out of the ground, and hit the bat leader in the air. Although the earth pillar's attack was just a tickle to the bat leader, and only delayed it for a blink of an eye. However, in this blink of an eye, Leng Shiqi's 3 arrows were already shot out. The 3 arrows shot towards the bat leader in a triangular formation. Unfortunately, the bat leader's body was very big, but it was very agile. It kept twisting in the air, and cleverly dodged the 3 arrows. Then the bat leader rushed over again. But what it did not expect was that the 3 arrows that it dodged actually turned around in the air, and continued to shoot towards it. Pu, the 3 arrows hit the bat leader in a row, and the arrows were nailed to its back. Although the bat leader was also a rank 1 peak monster, its body was much weaker than the claw wolf. It immediately let out a silent roar, and its body swayed in the air. Leng Shiqi's expression was cold, and 2 more arrows appeared in his hand, and he shot the arrows in one breath. The 2 arrows pierced through the bat leader's wings, causing it to fall to the ground. In the next moment, the sword arrived. Chapter 88. After a while, Leng Shiqi adjusted himself after killing the strange bird leader and finally stepped into the last area. This was a circular space with a radius of several tens of feet. At the end, there was something that looked like a cage. Leng Shiqi channeled his spirit energy into his eyes and looked carefully. It was a round door with an unknown array engraved around it. However, the array was now dim. In the middle, there were a dozen thick iron pillars that seemed to be imprisoning something. "This is the final battle," Leng Shiqi muttered. However, he did not continue to move forward because he knew that as long as he took another step, the final monster, the spiritual ruin beast king, would break free. Looking back at the monsters he had killed along the way, it was to prevent outsiders from entering and also to seal the spiritual ruin beast king. Now that all the monsters outside were killed by Leng Shiqi, the seal naturally no longer existed. According to Leng Shiqi's guess, the previous 2 elite monsters were peak rank 1 monsters. Then, how strong would the final boss be? The spiritual ruin beast king was probably a rank 2 monster. A rank 2 monster was equivalent to a spirit cultivator in the spirit transformation realm. It was even stronger than a normal spirit cultivator in the spirit transformation realm. Leng Shiqi had never seen a rank 2 monster before, let alone fight one. However, just killing the sharp claw wolves had already made him use all his strength. How would he face a rank 2 monster? Of course, Leng Shiqi was also prepared. Leng Shiqi took out the tendon-changing bow again. He did not use a normal arrow, but an arrow that was not an arrow from the system backpack. It was a 2-foot-long green cone. It was slightly thicker in the middle and thinner towards the sides. This was something that the Yushu clan found on Wuqing after destroying the Twin Heroes' Hall. Rank 2 Spirit Weapon, Cloud-Piercing Shuttle. It was also a one-time use rank 2 spirit weapon. Its lethality was extremely strong. At that time, Wuqing was ambushed by the Delta Origi and was instantly killed. He died before he could use this trump card. Otherwise, he would have had a chance to resist. In the end, this item fell into the hands of Leng Shiqi. Next, Leng Shiqi carefully placed one end of the cloud-piercing shuttle on the bowstring. He circulated his spirit force and the cloud-piercing shuttle immediately lit up with a faint green light. A sharp feeling came from it. This immediately increased Leng Shiqi's confidence. Then, Leng Shiqi continued to draw his bow and slowly moved forward. Roar! After Leng Shiqi took a few steps, a deafening roar resounded through the entire space. An abnormally tall demonic beast suddenly appeared behind the round door, but it was trapped by more than 10 iron pillars. However, the demonic beast stretched out its terrifyingly thick arms and grabbed the iron pillar. With a series of creaking sounds, the iron pillar was actually torn open by the demonic beast. Hong long long, the demonic beast suddenly leaped out, and its mountain-like body heavily smashed onto the ground, causing the surroundings to faintly tremble. Upon closer inspection, this demonic beast looked like a giant ape, similar to the ape-shaped puppet they encountered not long ago. However, this demonic beast's entire body was covered in a layer of thick and ferocious armor. Even its head was covered. It could be said that it was armed to the teeth. Only right above its abdomen was a fist-sized hole, the shape of which was exactly the same as the round door behind it. The demonic beast's aura was so strong that it was terrifying. Leng Shiqi could feel a heavy pressure on his shoulders even though he was standing far away. This was the final boss of the spiritual ruin instance, Rank 2 Demonic Beast, Spiritual Ruin Beast King. Roar, roar, roar. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King was freed and immediately roared excitedly. Waves of sound blew over, causing Leng Shiqi's clothes to flutter. Leng Shiqi could not help but narrow his eyes, and a shocking battle intent flashed in his eyes. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King waved its arms and continuously smashed its chest muscles. Leng Shiqi was constantly looking for an opportunity. Then, the Spiritual Ruin Beast King raised its arms high and opened its bloody mouth, not knowing what it was going to do. Opportunity. Leng Shiqi's eyes lit up. He loosened his numb right hand, and the cloud-piercing shuttle turned into a sharp green light and shot out. And its target was the hole in the middle of the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's body. Poochie, the cloud-piercing shuttle arrived in an instant. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King did not even have time to react before it pierced into the hole. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King's body froze. It definitely did not expect that it would be ambushed while it was still in the joy of being freed. A piercing pain instantly spread throughout its body. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King could not help but roar. Its bloody eyes opened wide and stared at Leng Shiqi. Then, it opened its bloody mouth and was about to pounce over and tear Leng Shiqi into pieces. But Leng Shiqi's expression did not change. He put away the tendon-changing bow, opened his left hand, and softly said a word, "Explode." Boom. Then, the cloud-piercing shuttle that pierced into the hole in the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's body suddenly exploded. Suddenly, a large amount of viscous blood mixed with pieces of internal organs spewed out from the hole in the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's body and mouth. Before they even fought, the Spiritual Ruin Beast King was already injured. And it was an internal injury. Even so, Leng Shiqi did not dare to let his guard down. This was because the Spiritual Ruin Beast King was charging towards them like a moving mountain. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King had not even gotten close, but the heat wave came first. Leng Shiqi immediately used Ghost Parade and Confusion Steps to dodge. But unexpectedly, the Spiritual Ruin Beast King suddenly jumped up and smashed towards where Leng Shiqi was. Boom! With a sound, a 2 chi deep hole appeared on the ground. And Leng Shiqi's figure was long gone. Right now, Leng Shiqi was actually behind the Spiritual Ruin Beast King. Leng Shiqi held the sword hilt and unsheathed it. The moment it was unsheathed, it lit up with a dazzling sword light and fiercely stood on the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's tail. The only part of the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's body that was exposed outside of its armor was its tail. The sword light slashed on the thick tail, but to Leng Shiqi's surprise, this gale cut only cut halfway and did not cut off the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's tail. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King had already reacted. It suddenly swung its tail and directly slapped Leng Shiqi away. Leng Shiqi's body slammed onto the ground and slid far away. The blood in his body was in turmoil, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. What a strong physical body! Leng Shiqi exclaimed to himself. That gale cut was a level 2 spiritual technique at the perfection stage. It was very powerful, and Leng Shiqi was very comfortable using it. And his sword was also a level 3 spiritual weapon. Even so, it could not cut off the Spiritual Ruin Beast King's tail. He really did not expect a level 2 monster's physical body to be so strong. But Leng Shiqi immediately stopped thinking about it. He still had a trace of confidence because he still had a trump card that he had not used. He might be able to kill this Spiritual Ruin Beast King. The battle intent in his eyes increased. Chapter 90. The Spiritual Ruin Beast King's tail was able to injure Leng Shiqi. Fortunately, his body was quite strong, otherwise, his flesh would have been torn apart. A rank 2 monster was on a completely different level from a rank 1 monster. Whether it was strength, defense, or speed, they were all much stronger than a rank 1 monster. In fact, he even gained a bit of intelligence. When the Spiritual Ruin Beast King saw Leng Shiqi fall to the ground, it raised its arms above its head and slammed them into the ground. But the strange thing was, even though it slammed down with such a heavy fist, the ground was not damaged at all. Ling Shiqi's eyes widened as if he thought of something. He immediately slapped the ground with one hand and his body stood up. Then, he jumped high into the air. At this time, with the spiritual ruin beast king as the center, the ground around it began to tremble violently. A terrifying wave of spirit power burst out. Instantly, the ground cracked and rocks flew everywhere. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi realized what the spiritual ruin beast king was going to do and jumped into the air. But what he did not expect was that the spiritual ruin beast king grabbed with both hands and pulled out a huge rock from the ground. It suddenly threw it out and smashed towards Ling Shiqi, who was still in midair. Ling Shiqi's expression changed, but he quickly calmed down. He stretched out his left hand and used the wind slash with his right hand. But this time, the wind slash easily cut the rock that was taller than him in half as if it was tofu. It was Ling Shiqi who used the hand of earth to soften the rock and cut it in half. Then, Ling Shiqi finally landed. The moment he landed, he took out the tendon-changing bow and shot 3 arrows. Facing these 3 arrows, the spiritual ruin beast king did not even dodge and continued to charge at Ling Shiqi. The 3 arrows hit the spiritual ruin beast king's armor and were deflected. They could not move an inch. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi's heart sank. Since the sneak attack failed and ranged attacks failed, he could only fight in close range. Ling Shiqi immediately used Ghost Parade and Confusion Footwork at the same time, constantly dodging the attacks of the spiritual ruin beast king. Every punch from the spiritual ruin beast king created a huge crater in the ground. Ling Shiqi could not take a single hit and could only keep dodging. Every time he had the chance, his spirit weapon could only scratch the spiritual ruin beast king's armor and could not hurt it at all. Slowly, the spiritual energy of the Ling Shiqi became less and less, and the speed slowed down. Finally, Ling Shiqi's reaction was a beat too slow. The spiritual ruin beast king's huge fist landed in front of him. Ling Shiqi only had time to release an earth wall, but this earth wall was instantly shattered like paper. The beast king's fist landed squarely on Ling Shiqi's body. Pooh! Ling Shiqi was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. Blood splattered all over the ground. He fell heavily on the ground. His entire body felt like it was falling apart. Not only that, the spiritual energy in his body was also in chaos. Just this one attack instantly caused Ling Shiqi to be heavily injured. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi used the cloud-piercing shuttle to injure the spiritual ruin beast king from the start. He also cultivated a body refinement technique. Otherwise, this punch from the spiritual ruin beast king would have taken his life. This was a rank 2 demon beast. Ling Shiqi could not help but feel a sense of helplessness. You might not be able to break its defense even if you slashed it 10 times. One punch from it would take away half of your life. How could you fight it? But now, Ling Shiqi had no way out. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. The only way to survive was to fight. Fight with his life. Ling Shiqi's heart moved, and a blood-colored pill appeared in his palm. Right now, his expression was very complicated. There was heartache, viciousness, madness, and also hope. The pill in his hand was a rank 4 pill, blood explosion pill. Seeing that the spiritual ruin beast king was about to attack again, Ling Shiqi did not hesitate and swallowed the blood explosion pill. In the next moment, Ling Shiqi immediately felt the spiritual energy and blood in his body begin to boil. Waves of powerful energy filled his body. He could not even feel the pain from his injury. Ha! Ling Shiqi suddenly shouted. His body emitted a faint blood glow. It was somewhat similar to Zhang Jiga, but Ling Shiqi's blood glow was more vigorous. Power! 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 It was as if endless power was constantly surging in Ling Shiqi's body. Even his face was a little distorted, and a layer of red light appeared in his eyes. The spiritual ruin beast king did not care about Ling Shiqi. It punched again. Ling Shiqi did not dodge this time. He also punched. This punch was incomparably ferocious. It was as if a ferocious tiger was treading on the waves, directly attacking the waves. At this critical moment, he finally merged the wave-breaking fist, tiger roaring fist, and triple-fold palm together. It became the tiger wave-stepping fist. When the two fists met, a terrifying shockwave exploded. With Leng Shiqi and the spiritual ruin beast king as the center, the ground cracked and even sank a few inches. The scene of the two fists meeting was a little strange. But what was even stranger and more surprising was that Leng Shiqi did not even take half a step back. The moment he punched out, he finally completely fused the three waves tiger break fist. One yin and one yang, one bright and one dark, the two forces perfectly fused together, and forcefully blocked the spiritual ruin beast king's punch. And his feet only sank into the ground. It was a world of difference compared to before. As for the spiritual ruin beast king's armor, there were several large cracks. And a surge of internal force ignored the surface defense and entered its palm, destroying its internal meridians and flesh. But at this moment, Leng Shiqi still felt power surging out of his body. He actually felt like he was going to explode. He could not wait to release this power. Ah! He roared and attacked. He punched again. It was still the tiger wave stepping fist. The spiritual ruin beast king was stunned at first. With its intelligence, it could not understand how a weak insect could suddenly become so strong. But out of its violent instincts, the spiritual ruin beast king still punched back. Boom, 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 boom. One man and one beast just stood there and punched at each other. The ground around them had already sunk more than a foot deep because of the impact. The armor on the spiritual ruin beast king's fists were completely shattered and its fists were covered in blood. Leng Shiqi was not in a good state either. His fists were a bloody mess. No matter how strong he was, the strength of his body did not change. If this continued, Leng Shiqi's arms would be broken sooner or later. The pain seemed to make Leng Shiqi regain some consciousness. His eyes flashed and a red light flashed. He instantly appeared behind the spiritual ruin beast king. With a zang sound, the spirit blade was unsheathed. The blade drew a beautiful crescent blood-colored blade ray. The blood-red blade aura instantly cut through the spiritual ruin beast king's thigh, destroying the armor on it as easily as breaking rotten wood. The blade aura cut deeply into the flesh. The spiritual ruin beast king immediately staggered and lost its balance. Using this opportunity, Leng Shiqi swung out another blade ray and directly cut off the spiritual ruin beast king's tail. Chapter 91. Leng Shiqi cut off the spiritual ruin beast king's tail in one strike. The tail was the key to a monster's balance. The sudden loss of its tail caused the spiritual ruin beast king to lose its balance and fall heavily to the ground. The spiritual ruin beast king couldn't help but cry out in pain. However, the brutality in its two blood-red eyes became even stronger. It opened its bloody mouth and specks of blood quickly gathered in its mouth. Leng Shiqi's expression changed when he saw this. He quickly retreated and with a thought, 3 thick earth walls rose up from the ground. The moment the earth walls rose up, a pillar of red light shot out from the spiritual ruin beast king's mouth. The 3 earthen walls were instantly submerged by the red light as if they were nothing. At this moment, Leng Shiqi had already teleported far away. Unexpectedly, the spiritual ruin beast king turned its head and controlled the red beam of light to sweep towards Leng Shiqi. Wherever it passed, the earth and rocks would fly and become a mess. Leng Shiqi immediately moved and used the ghost parade and confusion steps to the extreme. He teleported a dozen times and flashed to the side of the spiritual ruin beast king. Then, he jumped high and landed on the spiritual ruin beast king's head. Then, he slammed his fists down. Boom boom. Bang. Leng Shiqi's fists slammed into the spiritual ruin beast king's head. The two forces, one light and one dark, tore apart its helmet and destroyed the insides of its head. At the same time, this power caused the spiritual ruin beast king to involuntarily close its mouth. The red beam of light instantly stopped, and instead, there was a series of explosions coming from its mouth. There was even the smell of something burning coming from it. Roar, 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 the spiritual ruin beast king roared into the sky as it waved its arms wildly. Leng Shiqi quickly jumped up from its head. While dodging the attack, he twisted his body in the air and a silver spear appeared in his hand. In mid-air, the Leng Shiqi swung his spear and drew a huge bloody cross in the air. Immediately after, the silver spear tip exploded with a piercing blood-red light. Leng Shiqi's right arm bulged as he used all of his strength to shoot out the silver spear. This was the heavy kill cross spear. The silver spear shot out with a bloody cross and pierced into the spiritual ruin beast king's bloody mouth. The mouth was definitely the weakest. The silver spear directly pierced through the spiritual ruin beast king's head and nailed the spiritual ruin beast king to the ground. At this time, Leng Shiqi suddenly felt a surge of exhaustion in his body, and he accidentally fell from the sky. Leng Shiqi felt the explosive power in his body disappear as quickly as it came. At this moment, it was receding like the tide. Leng Shiqi turned his head to look at the dying spiritual ruin beast king not far away. He knew that he had to end the battle quickly. Immediately, a vicious look flashed across his eyes. Leng Shiqi quickly arrived in front of the spiritual ruin beast king. With a shake of his spirit sword, dozens of channel-opening sword chi entered the spiritual ruin beast king's mouth. The invisible sword chi immediately killed its life force. Leng Shiqi was still not at ease. He reached out his left hand and a fiery red bead appeared in his palm. He threw the bead into the hole in the spiritual ruin beast king's body and then immediately retreated. Just as Leng Shiqi retreated dozens of feet, there was a loud boom from the hole in the spiritual ruin beast king. Large flames burst out and completely engulfed the spiritual ruin beast king. This was Leng Shiqi's last trump card, fire bead. Huff huff, at this moment, Leng Shiqi felt like his body was hollowed out as he panted heavily. His body's strength was quickly fading. He couldn't even hold his weapon and it fell to the ground. In the end, Leng Shiqi didn't even have the strength to stand and sat on the ground. Leng Shiqi's eyes were locked on the spiritual ruin beast king. Although it was lying on the ground motionless, Leng Shiqi still had a question in his heart: is it dead? If the spiritual ruin beast king didn't die like this, then Leng Shiqi had to admit defeat. Just as Leng Shiqi's heart was beating like a drum, someone seemed to know his question and came to answer it for him. A light blue door suddenly appeared beside Leng Shiqi, and a platform rose up from the center of the ground. A silver-white box was placed on top of the platform. A line of words that only Leng Shiqi could see appeared in front of him. Congratulations, host, for passing the spiritual ruin instance. Completion rate 100%. Please check your reward. Seeing this line of words, Leng Shiqi could finally confirm that the spiritual ruin beast king was indeed dead. The huge rock in his heart finally fell to the ground. He simply laid down on the ground, facing upwards to form a big shape. The pale Leng Shiqi panted heavily and even coughed violently a few times. Every time he coughed out a bit of blood. He looked inside himself and found that more than 50% of his meridians were damaged. The most serious ones were almost broken. Other than that, there were wounds of varying depths all over his body. Especially his hands, they were a bloody mess. The spiritual chi in his body had been completely depleted. Ever since Leng Shiqi came to this world and came to Blood Mist Island, he had never suffered such serious injuries. But at the same time, he had never fought to his heart's content. At this moment, Leng Shiqi suddenly laughed. At first, his laughter was very soft, but it gradually became louder and louder. He didn't even stop when he accidentally aggravated his injuries. Rank 2 monster, that was a rank 2 monster. It finally died at his hands. Leng Shiqi had a majestic feeling in his heart that needed to be expressed. After a while, Leng Shiqi finally calmed down. He didn't rush to open the treasure chest and leave. Instead, he sat down and swallowed a few pills. Then he took out spirit stones to recover his spirit chi. The instance had a time limit of 1 day. Ling Shiqi estimated that 6 to 8 hours had passed. He still had a lot of time to do one thing. Ling Shiqi sat for a full 2 hours. At this moment, Ling Shiqi opened his eyes. There was a helpless look in his eyes. He smiled bitterly. I didn't expect my internal injuries to be so serious. Many of his meridians were damaged. His spirit qi recovered abnormally slowly. And right now, he could only recover about 70% of his spirit qi. Other than that, Ling Shiqi's face was still pale. His spirit qi could be quickly recovered with pills and spirit stones, but his blood qi could only be slowly recovered. Ling Shiqi shook his head and stood up. He walked to the huge corpse of the spiritual ruined beast king and pulled out the silver spear. However, there were several dents on the tip of the spear. It was obvious that it had been scrapped. Ling Shiqi did a rough calculation. He had lost the cloud-piercing shuttle, the silver spear, and the explosive bead in this instance. What made his heart ache the most was the rank 4 blood explosion pill. He helplessly said to himself, I lost so much this time. I don't know if the reward can make up for it. But before that, I should collect some interest. Chapter 92. Ling Shiqi sold the silver spear to the system for a few digits worth of system currency, then he pulled out a dagger from his ankle. Holding the dagger, Ling Shiqi carefully cut open the spiritual ruin beast king's head. The dead spiritual ruin beast king's body was not as hard as before, so the dagger easily went in. After a while, Ling Shiqi was pleasantly surprised as he pulled out a thumbnail-sized red bead from the spiritual ruin beast king's head. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a few streaks of blood slowly swimming in the bead. This was the spiritual ruin beast king's beast core. Only a tier 2 demonic beast would be able to refine a demonic core in its mind. Moreover, this demonic core looked extraordinary. Ling Shiqi nodded in satisfaction and put the beast core into the system space. Just this Yao core alone was worth several weapons he had lost. After putting away the beast core, Ling Shiqi's hands began to form seals, and the spiritual ruin beast king's corpse in front of him began to twitch strangely. Afterwards, several thick pillars of blood spurted out from the spiritual ruin beast king's wounds and gathered together. In the end, they formed a huge ball of blood. A heavy smell of blood radiated out. Gradually, the blood ball began to shrink, and finally shrank to the size of a fist. At this time, Ling Shiqi was covered in cold sweat. He already had internal injuries, and refining the beast blood for a long time consumed both spirit power and mental strength, so he was starting to feel tired. However, he could not give up on the rank 2 beast blood, so he could only grit his teeth and persevere. After Ling Shiqi took out the demonic core and refined the demonic blood, he walked to the front of the silver-white treasure chest. Opening the treasure chest, there were a few things inside, and the system sent out a notification, congratulations to the host for obtaining, Black Tortoise Soul. Congratulations to the host for obtaining, Beginner Backpack. Congratulations to the host for obtaining, Flowing Ink Robe. Congratulations to the host for obtaining, Billowing Starlight. Congratulations to the host for obtaining, Rank 2 Spiritual Skill, Spirit Attack. Congratulations to the host for obtaining, Experience Ball. There were a lot of things, but Ling Shiqi wasn't happy. He even wanted to say, that's it? I fought with my life on the line and almost died here. Rank 4 blood explosion pill and his injuries were all in exchange for this? At a glance, there wasn't even a single tier 3 resource. Ling Shiqi suddenly felt like he had suffered a huge loss. He secretly decided to throw away the next instance dungeon card that he got in the future. Ling Shiqi immediately took out a turtle shell from the box and threw it on the ground. That tortoise shell was the Black Tortoise Soul. The name sounded very powerful, but it was actually the lowest grade material used to strengthen equipment in the game world. But here, it was completely useless. Then, Ling Shiqi took out a burlap bag and a line of words appeared in front of him, you can add 6 slots to your inventory. Oh. A hint of joy flashed through Ling Shiqi's eyes. Ever since he opened his backpack, he had always felt that there were not enough slots. First of all, food and water took up 2 slots. In addition, he had several types of weapons that he was good at, as well as some personal items and trump cards, etc. 6 grids were simply not enough. Then, Ling Shiqi put the burlap bag into the system space. Instantly, there were 6 more slots. Excluding the slots that the backpack took up, he now had 11 slots that he could use. Ling Shiqi nodded slightly. Although this burlap bag couldn't increase his combat power, it was more practical. Voila! Then, Ling Shiqi took out the ink-flowing robe and shook it in his hand. The ink-flowing robe was black, but there were a few strands of silver lining at the cuffs and collar. The material of the robe was unusually smooth to the touch. Upon closer inspection, there were even traces of spiritual power flowing on it. This is a spiritual weapon? Ling Shiqi touched the robe and said with a bit of surprise. He was not unfamiliar with spiritual weapons, but 90% of the spiritual weapons that he had seen were weapons. Very few of them were defensive and special types. For example, Mo Yi's Vambrace or the cloud-piercing shuttle that Ling Shiqi used to attack the spiritual ruins Beast King. These types of spiritual weapons were very rare. But at least he had seen them before. But he had never seen a set of clothes that were all spiritual weapons. Even he couldn't tell what grade of spiritual weapon it was. Swords, spears, sticks and other spiritual weapons were all refined, but how was this set of clothes made? Ling Shiqi pondered for a while and shook his head. Since this item was produced by the system, then everything was possible. Ling Shiqi had just gone through a series of battles and the black cloak on him was already tattered. Then, he took off the cloak and changed into the ink-flowing robe. The clothes fit him well and looked good. It looked like a battle suit, but also a little like a windbreaker. What was even more peculiar was that Ling Shiqi immediately felt a weak warmth flowing through his body. Vaguely, even his injuries seemed to be getting better. Ling Shiqi was surprised and happy at the same time. He touched the sleeves of the robe lovingly. Then the spiritual power in his body flowed into the ink-flowing robe. On the surface of the robe, lines of silver lines appeared. The spiritual power flowed along the silver lines and formed a layer of silver film on the surface of the robe. Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly drew out a dagger and slashed his left arm. Then a surprising scene appeared. The moment the dagger stabbed into his arm, it seemed to have stabbed into an extremely slippery object and slashed to the side. Good stuff. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but shout out these 3 words. The value of this ink-flowing robe was definitely not inferior to a 3rd-tier spiritual weapon. At this moment, Ling Shiqi's mood finally improved a little. He then reached out his left hand and picked up the blue and green ball of light from the box. The moment Ling Shiqi's hand touched the ball of light suddenly went into his palm and disappeared. However, Ling Shiqi didn't panic because he saw a tattoo appear on his left palm. The shape of the tattoo was almost the same as the ball of light just now. At the same time, Ling Shiqi also saw the system prompt and knew that this shining starlight was also a 2nd-tier spiritual weapon. What was different was that this type of spiritual weapon was specially used to amplify spiritual skills. Ling Shiqi immediately moved his spiritual power and the tattoo on his left hand immediately lit up. He quickly formed a few spiritual seals and used his only spiritual skill, the centipede curse. A red circle of light appeared. In the circle of light, there was a lifelike centipede constantly twisting its body. Ling Shiqi carefully observed and secretly nodded. This centipede is indeed a bit bigger than before, but the amplification effect isn't very obvious. This waving radiant starlight conforms to the norm. He withdrew his spiritual power and the light in his left palm disappeared. He then took out the 2nd-tier spiritual skill, Spirit Strike. This Spirit Strike was a spiritual skill. Discovered 2nd-tier spiritual skill, Spirit Strike. Learn. Consume 1 skill point. Yes. Ling Shiqi's consciousness was immediately pulled into the system space. After repeating this a few times, Spirit Strike had reached perfection. With a thought, Ling Shiqi's left palm flashed with light. Then, he suddenly pushed forward and a strong wind swept out. Then, there was no then. Ling Shiqi was stunned. Chapter 93. That's it? Ling Shiqi looked at the power of the rank 2 spiritual skill, and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. In fact, Ling Shiqi had high hopes for this spirit attack spell. Otherwise, he wouldn't have leveled it up to perfection in one go. The main reason was because in his impression, spiritual techniques were all infinitely powerful. For example, the 10 soul mage puppets in the Battle of Puppets, each spell could take a life. However, Ling Shiqi's spirit attack blew out a gust of wind. Although the wind wasn't small, was it worthy of a rank 2 spell? At this time, Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes and began to recall the information about this spell in the game world. Gradually, Ling Shiqi's eyes lit up. He remembered that this spell actually had a prerequisite skill. The use of spirit attack required the use of elemental power. In the game world, there were 3 types of elemental power that could be used interchangeably. If different elemental powers were used, the power and effect of spirit attack would be different. For example, if the fire attribute was used, it would instantly spit out a majestic flame. If the ice attribute was used, it would release a cold frost that could freeze people. If the lightning attribute was used, it would pave a path of lightning. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi was a bit confused because he didn't have any elemental powers and didn't know how to obtain them. Perhaps when his cultivation was high, various types of elemental powers would appear. However, in his memory, he only knew that there were 3 realms, the spirit gathering realm, the pure spirit realm, and the spirit transformation realm. He didn't know what the realms after that were. Sigh, what a pity. It was a pity that he could not unleash the power that he should have after cultivating a rank 2 spiritual skill. In the end, Ling Shiqi picked up the last experience ball in the box. In his memory, there was no such thing in the game world. However, when Ling Shiqi saw the use of the experience ball, his expression changed and he instantly stuffed it into the system space. It's worth it, he mumbled softly. After counting all the loot, Ling Shiqi stepped into the light blue door and left the dungeon. Soon after, the ground beneath his feet disappeared, and the scenery around him changed rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his own cave. Ling Shiqi immediately looked around but didn't see Purple Feather. This meant that nothing had happened to the Yushu clan while he was in the instance dungeon. After that, Ling Shiqi began to recuperate. The damage to his meridians and the loss of his qi and blood caused him to only be able to display 50 to 60% of his peak strength. In his current state, it was definitely not suitable for him to go out and cause trouble. It was more important for him to focus on recuperating. It wasn't until 4 days later that Ling Shiqi's injuries were mostly healed. Although he hadn't fully recovered, he was able to display about 80% of his strength. Then, Ling Shiqi left the cave and went to the Yushu clan to find Yushu. When Yushu saw Ling Shiqi's extremely good-looking ink-flowing clothes, he immediately touched it. Drool flowed out from the corner of his mouth as he licked his face and said, he licked his lips and said, "Brother Dark Crow, where did you get this robe? It's so cool. I don't know if you noticed that this robe suits my temperament. Why don't you let me wear it?" Ling Shiqi rolled his eyes at Yushu and said, "Prepare something for me." Yushu saw that Ling Shiqi ignored him and started talking about serious matters. He sighed and said, "What do you want?" "Spiritual skills. Show me all the new spiritual techniques you've acquired. Also, find a spear-like spiritual weapon. It's best if it's a rank 2 spiritual weapon." Yushu had a look of doubt on his face, but he quickly concealed it and said, "Okay, wait a moment." In less than the time to brew a cup of tea, Yushu returned. He tightly hugged a small box and walked in with a spear on his shoulder. There are only 2 spear-like spiritual weapons. They're both rank 1 spiritual weapons. The one I brought is better. The spiritual skills are in this box," Yushu said while his eyes were focused on Ling Shiqi's expression. When Ling Shiqi saw the rank 1 spear, a look of displeasure flashed through his eyes. The current Leng Shiqi had comprehended his own moves in sword, saber, and fist techniques. Moreover, these 3 moves were all powerful and had their own characteristics. The chaotic blossom dazzling eyes was very flexible. It was very useful whether it was one-on-one or against many. Especially after incorporating the unblocking meridian sword chi, its power increased greatly and it could even block meridians. The waning moon rapid light slash was unparalleled in its sharpness. Even the claws of the mutated beast and the sharp-clawed wolf were cut off by this slash. It could be said that no rank 1 monster could withstand this slash. There was a feeling of being able to end everything with one slash. The ferocious tiger wave stomping fist was a combination of hardness and gentleness. Especially the hidden force that was hard to defend against and sometimes had miraculous effects. These 3 moves were very powerful, but at the same time, Leng Shiqi was unable to increase their power in a short period of time. Then Leng Shiqi planned to try to incorporate other types of spiritual skills. Spear, arrow, and spiritual skills were all in his list of options. Leng Shiqi already had the tendon-changing bow and the billowing starlight. He didn't lack any spiritual weapons for arrow and spiritual skills. He only lacked a spiritual spear. However, the Yushu clan didn't have a rank 2 spiritual spear. This inevitably disappointed him. Yushu sensed Leng Shiqi's displeasure and his heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly said, "Hee, brother Leng, Dark Crow. Right now, the clan doesn't have a rank 2 spiritual spear. Give me a few days and I will definitely get one for you." Leng Shiqi waved his hand. "No matter, I didn't tell you in advance. I don't blame you." With that, Leng Shiqi directly opened the small box and took out spiritual skills one after another. Yushu secretly heaved a sigh of relief and stood at the side. What surprised Leng Shiqi was that he actually took out a total of 9 spiritual skills from the box. Yushu's voice sounded at the right time. 5 of the spiritual skills were originally collected by the Twin Heroes Hall. The other 4 were obtained from the eruption of resources 2 days ago. Leng Shiqi nodded and began to look at the spiritual skills one by one. Yushu on the side was about to leave when Leng Shiqi said indifferently, "Just do it here." "Didn't you already guess it? Why are you still leaving?" Yushu smiled embarrassedly and subconsciously wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead. He obediently stood in place and didn't make a sound. Yushu knew that Leng Shiqi had many spiritual skills. However, he had personally seen Leng Shiqi use wind slash several times in a row in the Battle of Puppets. It was even stronger than his own wind slash. Yushu hadn't taught this wind slash to anyone else. He had only shown it to Leng Shiqi a few times. How did Leng Shiqi know wind slash? Yushu had already guessed that Leng Shiqi had a photographic memory and terrifying perception at the same time. However, he was only half right. Chapter 94. Leng Shiqi didn't care about Yushu's thoughts. Not to mention that he was already controlled by the heart-destroying pill, he wasn't afraid of Yushu having any thoughts. Ever since he returned from the Spiritual Ruins Instance Dungeon, Leng Shiqi's mentality and outlook had changed slightly. If it was before entering the dungeon, Leng Shiqi might have given Yushu a few pointers, but now he didn't have such plans. He laid out the 9 spiritual techniques one by one and skimmed through them first. Among them, there were 2 rank 2 spiritual skills, Rainbow Cauldron Sword Technique and Formation Breaking Overlord Spear. The rest were all rank 1 spiritual skills. The Rainbow Cauldron Sword Technique was the spiritual skill that Wu Qing and Wu Exine cultivated. It was a sword technique that had both offense and defense. Leng Shiqi picked up the sword technique and directly used his skill points to learn it. He had 2 rank 1 and 1 rank 3 sword technique, and this Rainbow Cauldron Sword Technique just happened to make up for it. The Formation Breaking Overlord Spear only had 1 move, which was the kind of spear technique that charged forward bravely. The rest of the rank 1 spiritual skills were of various types, so there was no need to mention them. Another thing that Leng Shiqi was a little surprised was that there was actually a spiritual skill, Ice Spread. This was a pleasant surprise. Then Leng Shiqi slowly and carefully looked through each spiritual skill. In reality, he used his skill points to learn them all and would upgrade them when he returned. At this time, Leng Shiqi's information had become: name, Leng Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation, 6th level of the pure spirit realm cultivation method, rank 3 cultivation method Moonlight Cloud manual, rank 3 cultivation method Beast origin demon breaking technique, incomplete, bloodline. Spiritual skills. Rank 1 spiritual skill Ice spread beginner, rank 2 spiritual skill Rainbow Cauldron sword technique beginner, rank 2 spiritual skill Formation breaking Overlord spear beginner, rank 2 spiritual skill Spirit attack perfection, rank 2 spiritual skill Wave breaking fist perfection, rank 2 spiritual skill Ghost archery perfection, rank 2 spiritual skill Gale slash perfection, rank 2 spiritual skill Heavy cross spear perfection, rank 3 spiritual skill Channel piercing sword aura perfection. System coins 120. After a while, Leng Shiqi put down the last spiritual technique book and changed the topic. What's going on in the desert recently? Yushu pondered for a moment, then sighed and said, "Sigh, don't mention it. The two forces in the desert, Tuzhuang and Flying Sand Sect, are actually preparing to negotiate for peace." What? Leng Shiqi almost thought that he had misheard. Was there such a thing as making peace on the Blood Fog Island? I've lived long enough to see this. That's right. Wasn't the Wind Valley empty? Originally, Tuzhuang and the Flying Sand Sect were fighting over the territory. But later on, it was unknown who brought up the idea of making peace. The idea was that there was no need to fight. Wouldn't it be fine if each of them occupied an area? It sounded reasonable, but after all, the desert was a place they had managed for a long time. No one wanted to give it up so easily. For the past few days, they have been arguing about who should stay in the desert and who should go to Wind Valley. Many thoughts flashed through Leng Shiqi's mind. Since he wanted to complete the mission, he had to take down the desert. However, there were still two forces there. Although the Yushu clan was stronger than any of them, if they wanted to forcefully swallow them, they would have to break a few teeth. This was also why they had to cooperate with the Delta Origi to act when they were dealing with the Twin Heroes Hall. If these two forces were killing each other and their strength continued to weaken, Leng Shiqi would naturally be happy to see it happen. Unexpectedly, they came up with a negotiation. This was a good thing for Tuzhuang and Flying Sand Sect, but it was not good news for Leng Shiqi. First, tell me the information about these two forces in detail. Leng Shiqi said. Yushu sorted out the information and said, Tuzhuang, the villa master is Tu Luo. Because the people who started the clan were surnamed Tu, they got this name. Tu Luo is now at the 5th level of the pure spirit realm, and there are 4 pure spirit realm spirit cultivators under him. The sect master of the Flying Sand Sect, Feng Feisha, is also at the 5th level of the pure spirit realm. There are 5 pure spirit realm spirit cultivators under him, but the number of spirit gathering cultivators is less than Tuzhuang. Overall, the two sides are evenly matched. It is also because of this that they chose to negotiate. Leng Shiqi continued. Yes, neither of them can do anything to the other. Negotiating for peace is indeed a very wise choice. Yushu said. You said that they have been negotiating for a few days? It doesn't seem to be going well? Leng Shiqi asked. Yushu nodded. That's right, they all want to continue staying in the desert. After all, they are very familiar with the desert. In addition, I heard that there are other forces that have designs on Wind Valley. If they go to Wind Valley, they might make another strong enemy. Leng Shiqi muttered to himself for a moment. We must destroy their peace talks. It's best if they fight, then we can take the opportunity to enter. Destroy? How do we destroy this? Bring people to fight? Leng Shiqi did not pay attention to Yushu's nonsense. He lowered his gaze and started to think. After a moment, Leng Shiqi's eyes lit up and asked, since they are evenly matched, then if an expert joins one side, do you think they will still negotiate? Yushu was a little confused when he heard this. He did not know what Leng Shiqi wanted to do and said, the possibility of this is not very high. After all, one person's strength is limited. one more person might not be able to bring about a huge advantage. The Flying Sands sect has one more pure spirit realm spirit cultivator than Tuzhuang. Didn't they still agree to the peace talks? I'm talking about an expert. Haha, expert? How tall would that be? The tent is about this tall. Yushu laughed. But as he laughed, he saw Ling Shiqi's unfriendly gaze and immediately stopped. Yushu suddenly thought of something and shouted, "Don't tell me you want to do it yourself?" Ling Shiqi nodded slightly and said, "You're not stupid. With Brother Dark Crow's strength, it is indeed possible to break the balance between Tuzhuang and the Flying Sands sect. However, they will definitely remember you in the battle at the wetlands and know that you are a member of the Yushu clan. They won't let you join their forces so easily," Yushu said hesitantly. Ling Shiqi raised the corner of his mouth and said, "Dark Crow is the deputy leader of the Yushu clan, everyone knows this. But there is one person who is not weaker than Dark Crow, but does not belong to any force. He is the best candidate." When Yushu heard this, he turned his head and stared at the black mask on Ling Shiqi's face. He had been looking at this mask for a long time, and he was used to calling him Brother Dark Crow. He even felt that the person, Dark Crow, was very familiar. But Yushu seemed to have gradually forgotten the face under the dark golden mask. It was a face that had once made him feel fear and despair. He vaguely knew what Ling Shiqi was thinking, and also knew what he was going to say next, but he still asked, "What's the matter? Who is that person?" Ling Shiqi took off the dark golden mask that he had been wearing for a long time, revealing a slightly pale and handsome face. He faintly said a word, "Me." Chapter 95. Sand, as the name implied, the ground in this area was covered with a layer of dry and hard sand. Even the air felt a little dry. A black-clothed youth walked on the sand with a long sword on his back, making rustling sounds. He was also carrying a round cloth bag in his hand. Ling Shiqi walked and looked at the camp in the distance. That was where the Flying Sands sect was located. The Flying Sands sect was the target that Ling Shiqi chose to join. The Flying Sands sect had one more spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm than Tuzhuang, but there were fewer people below, so they were willing to negotiate with Tuzhuang. If he was an expert at the 6th level of the pure spirit realm, Feng Feisha would most likely give up on the peace talks and even use the peace talks to ambush Tuzhuang. For Ling Shiqi, the most difficult thing was how to join the Flying Sands sect and make them go back on their word. "Who is it?" When Ling Shiqi walked to the gate of the Flying Sands sect, the two gatekeepers immediately stopped him and asked sternly. However, Ling Shiqi did not stop. The two of them immediately pulled out their weapons, but in the blink of an eye, Ling Shiqi's figure disappeared in front of their eyes. When they looked again, he had already entered the gate of the Flying Sands sect, and the clothes of the two gatekeepers suddenly tore open. The two of them were so frightened that their faces turned pale and they hurriedly shouted, "Someone come quickly. There's an enemy." As soon as he finished speaking, more than 10 people quickly ran over, and even more people ran over. In a moment, dozens of people directly surrounded Ling Shiqi, but they were all spirit cultivators in the spirit gathering realm. They could not sense the aura on Ling Shiqi's body, so they knew that they could not deal with him, so they just surrounded him and did not rush to make a move. At this time, a yellow-faced youth with rough skin walked over. He was the sect master of the Flying Sands sect, Feng Feisha. When a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm behind him saw Ling Shiqi, he panicked and revealed a terrified expression. However, everyone's attention was on Ling Shiqi, and no one noticed him. When Feng Feisha heard the commotion, he quickly rushed over. He originally thought that the people of Tuzhuang had gone crazy and were attacking, but he did not expect that there was only one person. However, Feng Feisha subconsciously thought that this person who was surrounded by them could not be underestimated. Because he was simply too calm. He was clearly surrounded by an entire faction of people. If a fight broke out, it could be said that he would not be able to escape even if he had wings. He would undoubtedly die. However, this person's face was as calm as the wind, as if the people around him didn't exist. Feng Feisha could feel that this person was not pretending. He really did not put the people around him in his eyes. Don't panic, put down your weapons. I don't think this brother is here to cause trouble for us. Feng Feisha's eyes flashed with a trace of light as he loudly said. When everyone heard this, hesitation appeared on their faces. However, they could not disobey the sect master's words. They put down their weapons, but their vigilance did not decrease in the slightest. Sect Master Feng is indeed smart. I am Ling Shiqi. I am here to give Sect Master Feng a big gift. Ling Shiqi said indifferently, then threw the cloth bag in his hand at Feng Feisha's feet. At this time, Feng Feisha did not pick up the cloth bag. A person next to him picked up the cloth bag knowingly. When he touched the cloth bag, he felt a sticky touch. When he opened it, he saw that there was a head inside. Ah, this is Ling Shuangtian. Ling Shuangtian? Tu Zhuang's pure spirit realm spirit cultivator. That's right, he was the one who almost killed me back then. Could it be that this Ling Shiqi killed him? I remember that Ling Shuangtian was at the 3rd level of the pure spirit realm. To be able to kill him, this Ling Shiqi must be even stronger. Seeing Ling Shuangtian's head, the people next to him began to discuss in surprise. Even Feng Feisha was surprised. As an old opponent, he naturally knew how difficult it was to deal with Ling Shuangtian. Ling Shuangtian was definitely Tu Zhuang's right-hand man. This person died just like that? Although he was a little happy in his heart, he could not understand why this Ling Shiqi would do this. What was his purpose? Feng Feisha smiled and cupped his fists. Brother Ling's gift is too generous. Feng Feisha is ashamed to accept it. Ling Shiqi naturally understood the meaning of Feng Feisha's words and immediately said, Sect Master Feng can accept it calmly because I am planning to join your sect. This head is my sincerity. When Ling Shiqi said this, it immediately caused a burst of shock. Instead of being happy about the addition of an expert, everyone looked at him suspiciously. Everyone thought that Ling Shiqi must have some ulterior motive. Ling Shiqi glanced around and chuckled. Why are you all so suspicious? I only have one purpose in joining the Flying Sand sect, and that is to save myself. Save yourself? Who did you offend? When Feng Feisha heard this, he was slightly relieved and immediately asked. Yes, because not long ago, I offended the Yushu clan. What? The Yushu clan? Feng Feisha could not help but exclaim. After the puppet war, the entire Blood Mist Island knew how terrifying the Yushu clan was. In terms of strength, they could definitely be ranked in the top 3. Some people even thought that the Yushu clan was the strongest force on Blood Mist Island. This Ling Shiqi offended the Yushu clan, so he came to join the Flying Sand sect. But the Flying Sand sect might not be able to survive. Moreover, what he said might not be true. At this time, the person who was standing behind Feng Feisha, who was frightened just now, walked to his side and whispered a few words. Feng Feisha's expression changed several times after hearing this. From time to time, he would look at Ling Shiqi. In fact, the person who spoke was actually someone from the Bilichuan. He was also one of the people who surrounded and killed Ling Shiqi. He was one of the people who secretly escaped when Blood is no different stopped Ling Shiqi. However, at that time, he was only at the 9th level of the Spirit Gathering realm. Later, he broke through to the Pure Spirit realm and joined the Flying Sand sect. He had just told Feng Feisha about Ling Shiqi's situation. Feng Feisha now knew that Ling Shiqi was not lying. Moreover, he was very powerful. However, he still had a big question in his heart. Thinking of this, Feng Feisha asked, I see. Then why didn't you join Tu Zhuang, but join me? Ling Shiqi's mouth moved slightly and said these few words. I met him on the way, so I killed him. Hearing this, Feng Feisha's face darkened. He finally understood. The other party meant that because he met Ling Shuangtian, he killed him and then joined the Flying Sand sect as a show of sincerity. And the deeper meaning was that if he met someone from the Flying Sand sect, he would be holding the head of the Flying Sand sect's member and going to Tuzhuang. Feng Feisha's face was naturally ugly. He thought to himself, what an arrogant person. However, the more he acted like this, the more Feng Feisha felt that Leng Shiqi simply wanted to find a backer. He also knew that Leng Shiqi would not have any loyalty to him. However, this was not important. What was important was that as long as Leng Shiqi joined, then he would have a way to deal a heavy blow to Tuzhuang. Thinking of this, Feng Feisha already had an idea in his heart. However, he still wanted to see if Leng Shiqi was worth his protection. If the Flying Sand sect accepted Leng Shiqi, it meant that they would become enemies with the Yushu clan. If they attracted the attention of the Yushu clan because of him, wouldn't the gains not make up for the losses? Therefore, he had to show enough value. How to show his value? That could only be strength. Feng Feisha waved his hand and the person next to him immediately handed over a long stick. The two ends of the long stick were embedded with a few golden rings. He suddenly stood the long stick up and the long stick directly sank into the ground. He had no proof, so he had to personally test Leng Shiqi's strength. Thus, Feng Feisha channeled all of his spiritual energy and shouted in a low voice, "The Flying Sand sect can protect you, even if the enemy is the Yushu clan. However, it depends on whether you have the qualifications or not." However, before he finished speaking, there was a whoosh sound. Leng Shiqi's cold sword was unsheathed. His body was like the wind and his sword was like a rainbow. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Feng Feisha. This was the Rainbow Cauldron Sword Technique's shocking rainbow sword style. Feng Feisha's expression changed slightly. He waved the heavy stick in his hand and smashed down several stick shadows. However, under the stick shadows, there was no sign of Leng Shiqi. Immediately, Feng Feisha felt a chill behind his back. However, he heard Leng Shiqi's strange voice, "Now, I don't know if I have the qualifications." Chapter 96. That night, Feng Feisha passed down one order after another, and the entire Flying Sand clan quickly began to operate. "Remember what you have to do. You may leave." Feng Feisha finished speaking, and the 5 people in front of him got up and left. However, one of them hesitated for a moment and decided to stay. "Hua Luo, is there anything else?" Feng Feisha asked. "Clan Master, I still think that Leng Shiqi is too suspicious. We can't trust him," Hua Luo said in a deep voice. Feng Feisha first looked at him with admiration, then said, "Of course we can't trust him. We're just taking what we need. We used it to heavily injure Tuzhuang, and he used our power to make the Yushu clan not dare to touch him. That's all. But Leng Shiqi is so strong. Why would he be afraid of the Yushu clan?" Hua Luo thought about how Leng Shiqi instantly defeated his clan master not long ago and was puzzled. Feng Feisha didn't care and said, "Hua Luo, you didn't go to the battle at the wetlands, so you don't know the strength of the Yushu clan. Yushu clan's clan master, Yushu, is a very strong person. However, the strongest person in the Yushu clan is not him, but someone called Dark Crow. You don't know how terrifyingly strong that Dark Crow saber technique is. It's terrifying to the point of being breathtaking. Although Leng Shiqi is strong, he definitely won't be able to withstand the combined might of Yushu and Dark Crow. So you're worrying too much." Hearing those words, Hua Luo finally felt relieved. Then, he took his leave. At this time, Leng Shiqi was alone in a small tent. The reason why he could successfully join the Flying Sand clan today was because he didn't use any tricks, schemes, or even a single lie. This was because he knew that the leaders who could control a force were all shrewd people. Any schemes and lies could be easily seen through. So Leng Shiqi did the opposite. Everything he said was the truth. He did indeed have a blood feud with the Yushu clan. This was something that could be confirmed very quickly if he sent someone to investigate. It was just that he didn't expect that the Flying Sand sect had someone who had once tried to kill him and helped him instead. It was also true that the Yushu clan was hunting him down. Before he came, he asked Yushu to release the news that they were looking for traces of Leng Shiqi. And the thing about Leng Shuangtian was also true. Leng Shiqi really happened to meet the people of Tuzhuang halfway. It was their bad luck. Now that Leng Shiqi had successfully joined the Flying Sand sect, there was no need for him to worry about the rest. With the addition of an expert like him, Tuzhuang had lost another spirit cultivator of the pure spirit realm. Under such circumstances, what was the point of talking about a peace treaty? Tonight, Feng Feisha had already begun to plot against Tuzhuang. He only needed to wait quietly. Late at night, Leng Shiqi sneaked out of the camp and sent a message to Yushu through Ziyu. The next day, the people of the Flying Sands sect and Tuzhuang agreed to meet at the center of the desert to continue the peace talks. Feng Feisha brought 2 pure spirit realm cultivators and 20 spirit gathering realm cultivators. Tuzhuang did the same. And Leng Shiqi was hidden among the spirit gathering realm cultivators. At this moment, he felt a little speechless because Feng Feisha's plan was almost the same as Ji Tianyi. They both wanted him to disguise himself as a spirit gathering realm cultivator and then ambush him. However, Feng Feisha was more decisive than Ji Tianyi. His target was the master of Tuzhuang, Tu Lu. At this time, Leng Shiqi also saw Tu Lu. Half of his face was covered by his hair, so he couldn't see his face clearly. According to Feng Feisha, when the corrosive rain fell, half of Tu Lu's face was corroded by the corrosive rain, so it was always covered. Feng Feisha and Tu Lu didn't have anything good to say when they met. Both sides had been fighting for so long, so the accumulated hatred was very deep. Even when they came to negotiate, their tone was very aggressive. Leng Shiqi didn't care about what they said. He was just secretly waiting for the signal to make a move. Not long after, Feng Feisha and Tuzhuang started to quarrel. It seemed like the negotiation had broken down. They even started to fight. But the strange thing was that the people around didn't react at all. No one came forward to help, as if this kind of thing happened often. The truth was that it was like this. Everyone was already used to it because they knew that Tu Lu and Feng Feisha couldn't do anything to each other. Moreover, they didn't even use their weapons. It was just a symbolic fight. So no one moved. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The 2 pure spirit realm cultivators of the Flying Sands sect walked forward as if they wanted to pull Feng Feisha back. But halfway, they suddenly pulled out their weapons and attacked Tu Lu. At the same time, Feng Feisha also waved his heavy rod and smashed it down again and again. Tu Lu's face changed. He quickly pulled out 2 pitch-black daggers from his waist to block. But he was already caught off guard. He was still fighting 1 against 3. In the blink of an eye, he was hit by Feng Feisha's rod and flew out. It was also at this moment that Tuzhuang's 2 pure spirit realm cultivators finally rushed to his side and glared at Feng Feisha and the others. Tu Lu's face was incomparably ashen. He shouted, "Feng Feisha! Are you crazy?" However, Feng Feisha didn't want to talk nonsense with him. He directly brought his people and rushed over. Tu Lu also waved his hand. The people behind him all rushed over and the 2 groups of people collided. But Tu Lu couldn't understand. They had the same number of people and were evenly matched in strength. If they continued to fight, other than increasing the number of casualties, there wouldn't be any results. Then a dang sound was heard. Tu Lu blocked Feng Feisha's rod. At this moment, Feng Feisha revealed a smile and said, "Tu Lu, why didn't Leng Shuangtian come?" When Feng Feisha mentioned Leng Shuangtian, Tu Lu's heart suddenly thumped. Yesterday, he sent Leng Shuangtian to bring a few people to the mountain to collect food and water. But he still hadn't returned. Tu Lu already knew that something was wrong, but he didn't expect that this was actually Feng Feisha's doing. Leng Shuangtian was an expert second only to you in Tuzhuang. He's dead. Do you think I still need to negotiate with you? Right now, my people are all attacking your camp. I'm only here to delay you for you. Feng Feisha said with a look of success. When he said this, Tu Zhuang's whole body trembled. His eyes widened. Obviously, he didn't expect Feng Feisha to do this. While Tu Lu was still in shock, Feng Feisha suddenly shouted, "Kill!" Tu Lu's face also turned ruthless. Since he had already reached this step, he could only fight to the death. Unfortunately, just as he wanted to fight to the death, a black figure flashed over like a ghost. Before the person arrived, the sword chi arrived first. Pu. Before Tu Lu could react, two deep sword wounds suddenly appeared on his legs. Furthermore, two waves of energy had invaded his meridians, sealing off the circulation of his spirit chi. Then, a rainbow-like sword light pierced over. Chapter 97. The chapter order is wrong. This is Chapter 97, and Chapter 96 is below. Sand Field, Flying Sand Clan's camp. Yushu commanded his subordinates to take care of everything, but Ling Shiqi was no longer here. After all, Ling Shiqi was not a member of the Yushu clan. Yushu told the public that he made a deal with Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi helped him occupy the sand field, and the Yushu clan no longer pursued Ling Shiqi. Therefore, Ling Shiqi returned to his cave and was ready to receive the mission reward. Now, the Yushu clan occupied a total of 3 areas, namely the sand field, the withered forest, and the fog area. The Yushu clan was secretly controlled by Ling Shiqi, so his mission was completed. The mission reward was an intermediate lottery ticket and a level 1 index card. Ling Shiqi immediately called out the system and clicked on the lottery page. The intermediate lottery option lit up. He looked at the introduction of the level 1 index card and figured out how to use it. To put it bluntly, it meant that he could actively add a selection condition during the lottery. The level 1 index card could actively select a type of virtual world, then the range of the lottery would be locked in this type of virtual world. Ling Shiqi looked at the options that appeared in front of him. There were text world, game world, animation world, movie world, etc. After thinking for a moment, Ling Shiqi decided to choose the game world. What Ling Shiqi needed the most now was naturally something that could increase his strength, and the other types of worlds were not very reliable. For example, although there were many hot-blooded animes in the animation world, there were also many daily animes, so he might not be able to get something that could be used. Only the game world, regardless of whether the game was good or bad, at least the game design was there, and it would definitely increase the player's strength. After making up his mind, Ling Shiqi clicked on the intermediate lottery. After a dazzling light, Ling Shiqi received his prize. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the intermediate prize, Advanced Mount Pill. Ling Shiqi, at this moment, Ling Shiqi only had 3 words in his mind. What are you after? How many days had he wasted and how much effort had he put in just for this mission and this chance to draw an intermediate prize? In the end, this was all he got. What high-grade Mount Pill? Where did this mount come from? Even though Ling Shiqi felt that his state of mind was already very high, he still couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. However, despite his anger, Ling Shiqi still put away the advanced Mount Pill. He wanted to use this high-grade Mount Pill to constantly remind himself that he couldn't trust this lottery system. He wanted to distance himself from the lottery system and start from himself. After a long while, Ling Shiqi finally calmed down and adjusted his state of mind. In the end, he decided to continue recuperating. While Ling Shiqi was recuperating in seclusion, Blood Mist Island was in an uproar. After the puppet battle in the wetlands, Blood Fog Island was left with a total of 13 forces. However, in just a dozen days, 5 forces had been destroyed. 4 of them were related to the Yushu clan. They were the Twin Heroes clan, the Green Lotus sect, the Flying Sand clan, and the Tu Zhuang clan. The last one had been destroyed by the Seiji. Furthermore, until now, the Yushu clan was the only force that occupied 3 districts. The Blood Moon and the Seiji only occupied 2 districts. Gradually, the title of the most powerful force on Blood Fog Island had landed on the Yushu clan's head. Just as everyone thought that the Yushu clan would seize the opportunity to take over Wind Valley, which no longer had any powerful forces, unexpectedly, the Yushu clan actually stopped. Many people couldn't understand, but the leaders of the various forces knew that Yushu had done the right thing. Although the Yushu clan was indeed very powerful and had many people, occupying 3 districts was already their limit. After all, the more districts they occupied, the more people they had to spread out to defend them. Not only did they have to defend against humans, they also had to defend against demonic beasts. Otherwise, no matter how much territory they occupied, if they couldn't defend it, what was the point of having it? However, regardless of the commotion outside, Ling Shiqi didn't pay any attention to it. 3 days later, Ling Shiqi finally recovered from the injuries he had sustained in the Spiritual Ruins Instance Dungeon. His next step was to attempt to break through to the 7th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. In every large realm, the 3rd to 4th level and the 6th to 7th level were all huge bottlenecks. Before entering the Spiritual Ruins Instance Dungeon, Ling Shiqi's cultivation was already at the peak of the 6th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. However, he had yet to touch the bottleneck of the 7th level at that time. The continuous battles in the Spiritual Ruins Instance Dungeon had allowed Ling Shiqi's cultivation to improve further. Now that he had recovered, he could clearly sense that he was about to touch the bottleneck. However, if he were to cultivate at a normal speed, he estimated that he would need at least another month to break through this bottleneck. He couldn't wait that long. Since that was the case, he could only rely on external objects. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi took out a fist-sized sticky blood ball from the system space. It was the demon blood of the Spiritual Ruins Beast King. Although relying on external objects to cultivate would make his foundation unstable, Ling Shiqi really couldn't wait for a month. He was very clear that his aptitude wasn't the best on Blood Mist Island. Whether it was Yushu, Hengming, Delta Origi, or even Shui Wuhai, they all had better aptitudes than him. The reason why his cultivation could keep up with these people was not only because of his own hard work and comprehension, but also because of various opportunities and coincidences. If he really cultivated step by step for more than a month, the others would have already broken through to the 7th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. It was a huge breakthrough from the 6th level to the 7th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. After the 7th level, it was the late stage of the Pure Spirit Realm. Whether it was the depth or the purity of the spiritual energy, it was much higher than the 6th level. Of course, even if the others broke through to the 7th level of the Pure Spirit Realm, he wasn't afraid. The most important thing was that he always had a sense of urgency in his heart. He had a feeling that there would be a huge change on Blood Mist Island soon. Therefore, he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. At most, he could slowly polish his spiritual energy after breaking through to the 7th level. He had done this when he was at the 5th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. Since he had made up his mind, then he would do it. Ling Shiqi first adjusted himself to the best state. He picked up the demonic blood, took a deep breath, and swallowed it. He had refined demonic blood several times, but this was the first time he had refined the demonic blood of a rank 2 demonic beast. Immediately, Ling Shiqi felt an incomparably powerful energy explode in his body. It was as if a bomb was stuffed in his stomach, and it was also filled with a tyrannical aura. Ling Shiqi didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly guided this energy to attack the barrier of the 7th level of the Pure Spirit Realm. Boom, 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 a series of muffled sounds came from his body. The demonic blood's energy violently attacked the bottleneck, and every time, Ling Shiqi felt that his body was going to explode. But he endured it and didn't make a sound. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi had cultivated the body refining technique 8 stones horizontal training technique, so the strength of his body was far beyond that of ordinary people. Otherwise, he would have already exploded and died. Of course, Ling Shiqi also didn't have a good time. His whole body was red, like a prawn in a steamer. At this time, the spiritual light of the ink-flowing clothes on his body suddenly circulated, and a burst of coolness hit his face. Immediately, it helped Ling Shiqi relieve a lot of pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Shiqi seized the time to break through the bottleneck with all his strength. Under the repeated attacks, the bottleneck was finally broken. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.